And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore podcast, where we never sit out. I'm Rose Matthew Dawson. I'm here today, joined again by the one, the only, the legend, CD. What is going on? What is going on? There's a lot going on, but I'm asking you, what's going on?
I mean, we're right in the heart of July right now, kind of waiting for all the media days to conclude, but we are talking ACC football right now. First conference of our conference breakdowns. Very excited to get into it. We're going to see. Obviously, it's been a disappointing conference the past couple years, really the past decade outside of
Yeah,
Clemson. But we're going to get
well, Florida
into,
State.
yeah, for a year or two.
Well, if you're talking about the last decade, we're talking very early in that decade.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm pumped. This is kind of the content, guys, that we've been talking about, that we've been wanting to push out in July. This is our best stuff. This is our best stuff. You want conference previews? We're going to give you over under win totals. We're going to give you dark horse for conference winners. We're going to give you awards, preseason awards. What? All of that here. All of that here. You can catch us on YouTube and Spotify. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like this content. And please let us know how we're doing. Share a comment. Catch us on Twitter at the Redshirt Soft. Send us a mailbag question at the Redshirt Sophomore at gmail.com. All these things. We thank you so much for your guys' support. We love doing this. We love doing this. Let's get into it. How about that? Let's just
Can't,
get into it. No recruiting update today because we have too much to talk about. Here we go. Up first, let's talk Boston College. Let's talk
oh,
Boston College.
real quick, if you are on podcasts on Spotify right now, we are sorry. We you don't get to see the graphics, but we actually do have graphics today for our YouTube crowd. You guys obviously can see that. We're gonna have our slideshow of all of our teams and breakdowns and whatnot. So if you're on podcast, just bear with us. We'll do our best to keep you informed. But you don't need to look at the graphics. But we thought it'd be fun and creative for our YouTube audience to see some visuals. But yeah, we can get into Boston College.
Absolutely. Let's look at. They were terrible last year. Now we know that they're beat up by injuries. Okay. They're 123rd in the country in points per game offensively. Yikes. How about
Bad.
how about 31 and a half points per game allowed? Yikes. That's bad. How about running the ball? They're the worst in the country. 2 yards per carry. Bad. Bad, bad, bad. Who do they lose? Phil Jerkovich. They lose Say Flowers to the NFL. Um, and they get back like a lot of the players that they had last year, and they had a transfer, Car Johnson. They had a transfer, Ryan O'Keefe. I mean, they added some guys, but the over under win total sitting at 5.5. CD, where are you? Where are you on this over under? Oh, hold on. CD's mic just gave out a little bit. I will give you what I think at this 5.5 is. They're not making a bowl game. It's soaring under for me. And now, if you look at the schedule, okay, if you take the average power rating, right, of these teams that they're playing in their schedule, right, it is the by far the easiest schedule in Power Five. By far the easiest. Get absolute cupcakes for out of conference, and you don't draw Clemson in conference, right? So that's a big deal. But man, they just look. They lost their left tackle, left guard, right guard, all within 3 weeks of the season last year. They still managed to win 3 games. But I don't know that this team actually improved all that much in offensive line. Like at the beginning of the year, they weren't even that good. They weren't that good either, right? Now you get another year with a lot of these guys. I do think their tackles have a lot of size. Get a 6'7", 6'8" guys there on the outside. Maybe they're going to hold up in the ACC. Got a couple big time defensive ends in this conference. Emmett Morehead at quarterback. That is a big drop off from Phil Jerkovich. It's a big drop off. Now, do I hate Emmett Morehead? I don't. I don't hate him. I actually kind of liked what I saw when I was watching him, but he looked fine in the spring game. But and when he played last year, when he had time, which he never did, he was okay. He was on time, but there's no focal point in this offense. Like, who are they going to get the ball to? Who?
It'll be that. Sorry, my mic's back. Hopefully, it'll be the transfer Ryan O'Keefe from UCF. That's a big get for them. He was very productive in the American last year. Obviously, I think the offense it might just be better by default. It's going to be worse in terms of the actual talent and playmakers on the team. Phil Jerkovich, like you said, Emmett Morehead is a step down talent wise, but Emmett Morehead is going to have a better year than Jerkovich because that O line hopefully is going to theoretically will be healthy this year. And yes, they weren't very good even when they were healthy, whatever. But there's something to say about continuity and getting better over a 12-game stretch with the 5 guys you're playing against. And what's nice about it is they do have a lot of depth, quote unquote depth in terms of experience because they had all those injuries. So people had to step up. Some young guys that were not ready, that probably still aren't ready, but they'll be a year better of experience in the ACC if they do have to step in and play. But yeah,
Well, let's not mistake experience though for talent, right? I mean, yeah, sure they're deep in terms of like experience, which normally correlates to talent. Well, sometimes it does, but I don't think it correlates to talent in this instance right here. I don't think it correlates to talent. I think like if they start dropping guys in the offensive line again, like it's also going to be another poop show. It's going to be another poop show. I mean, what they got 2 transfers in there, which is kind of nice to see. I like Logan Taylor. Kyle Hergel's pretty decent, but they might both be starting on this offensive line, but I don't know.
yeah. I mean, again, like I meant to say it earlier, but my mic cut out. I'm gonna lean under on this 5.5 team. I do like Jeff Halfley. I do root for Boston College all the time. But they were 3-9 last year, and I don't see 3 more wins of improvement this year. I think they could look better. Their schedule isn't terrible. We'll get into that later. But the offense just had no chance at all last year with all the injuries. And then defensively, I wouldn't say that they gave up on the offense, but the offense did not do any of them any favors. And yes, they were 102nd last year, but it was because they were on the field so much. And then with that, the injuries set in. And so, I mean, it was just tough. It was very tough.
Yeah, I
I still
agree.
don't think they're gonna win 6 games though.
Look, what I will credit them defensively, I think Jeff Halfley like knows like what kind of talent he wants in defense. The DBs are big. They're large. Look, you got
Long, very long
6'2",
playmakers.
6'4", 6'2", 6 foot, right? Like those are big. Those are big. Now that doesn't still got to be a good athlete, right? You lose a guy like Josh DeBerry to A&M, but you bring in Kari Johnson from Arkansas, who adds some zest to that secondary. Hopefully, if he plays, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what that. They're trying out a lot of stuff in spring right now. We'll see what sticks come time in the fall, but I don't think this defense is going to improve all that much either. Like, do we look like they brought in a couple transfers on the defensive line? George Rooks, Caleb Jones. Is that going to translate? Like they were a bottom 40 team in defense easily in the country last year. The run defense was horrendous. Now they actually had some good secondary play last year. I thought their stats reflect that. I mean, passing yards per game. Now, here's the thing though. Were teams passing the ball a lot in Boston College? No, maybe not.
They
But
didn't have to.
they didn't
They
have
got up
to.
early and then they just milked the clock because they knew that Boston College had no chance. Not only could they not run the ball, so teams because their offense line was terrible, so teams could just tee off on their poor running backs. I mean, yes, I don't know how good Pat Garrow really is, but it doesn't matter. He had no chance to start anyways, and then they could just tee off on them offensively. So then, I would like we said, like I talked about earlier, the defense was just put in a bad position. But yes, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
they still weren't great in general. It's Boston College, okay. This is not
Yeah.
Clemson or Florida State here.
Yeah, it's weird to say though, because we're saying like, oh yeah, they could improve, but let's hit the under. Well, you're leaning under. I'm hitting this under for sure. For
That's
sure.
that's a play for you, right? You're gonna back that up, right?
That's a play for me. That's absolutely a play. And it's at even right now. It's at even. Under 5.5 is even. So it's a DraftKings anyway. So wherever you guys make sure you guys are if you're shopping lines, right, make sure you're shopping at different places. Make sure you're getting the best value. So look at their schedule. Why did I say that there was such an easy schedule? In fact, the easiest in Power Five. Um, NIU week 1, Holy Cross week 2, right? Obviously, then they get FSU at home and they go to Louisville, Virginia. But then what's weird is that they get their out of conference games kind of in the middle of the season there. Uh, Army and Connecticut. Week 6 at Army. Week 9, they host Connecticut. So that out of conference schedule is just absolutely it's a cakewalk. People talk
You
about the
have to go
SEC.
4-0. If you're gonna make a bowl game this year, if you're gonna hit that over on the win total, you have to go 4-0 and then
Right.
sneak 2 wins out against
Right.
Virginia, maybe Georgia Tech, although I'm higher on Georgia Tech than some people are. Virginia Tech, you get Syracuse. So like there are wins to be had there, but I don't see it, and I know you don't either.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I think a lot of people that are playing the over on this are just looking at the schedule, licking their chops. But I think it's like, here's the thing: a lot of these teams can change, right? Some teams get better, some teams get worse as the season goes on. If I think Boston College is not going to get better, or if they're not going to be that good, you got to account for that variance of other teams getting better, right? Like, what if Virginia Tech is better than we think that they are, right? You know,
They have the same win total, by the way, with a harder schedule too.
yes.
And
So, like, what if Army all of a sudden is pretty good? I mean, I don't anticipate
even if they're
that.
not good, that's still hard to go week 6 in the middle of, at the end of your tough stretch with 6 games in a row after getting beat up by Florida State and Louisville, and then you get Virginia at home, which say what you want about them, and then to play that triple option offense in Army, is still tough. I know teams are moving away from, or I think Army is moving a little bit away from that triple option all the time, but it's still like it's not easy midweek to play them, especially if you're not accustomed to playing a couple triple option teams on your schedule, anyways.
Yes, I like getting the buy after that though. I like hitting the reset button after playing that ground and pound team, but I just don't see it. Defensively, it's like, yeah, their secondary might be pretty decent, but can Donovan Syracuse, can he do it all? I don't know. I don't know. So let's move on. Clemson. Uh, this is a team that made probably the biggest coordinator hire of this offseason, at least the most well known, right? I mean, sure, defensively, you lose Miles Murphy, Brian Bresee. Okay, that's really tough. But offensively, get Garrett Riley in there at offensive coordinator. And all of a sudden, people are really loving the idea of Cade Klubnik and Will Shipley playing with Garrett Riley. So if you look at their offensive stats actually are better than on the sheet than they really were, right? If you watched Clemson play offensively, you know that they struggled to pass the ball at times. They never had struggle running the ball. Will Shipley was unbelievable. In fact, CD drafted him in our running back draft a few weeks back. Defensively, they were fantastic. Their run defense was insane, but part of that was due to Miles Murphy and Brian Bresee. So their over-under win total right now is 10. It's 10 right now. Again, also too, you look at these losses. Clemson's not a team that dives into the transfer portal very much to go get talent, right? I mean, that was all about it's all about loyalty, right? The only guy that they got was Paul Tyson, who's Bear Bryant's grandson. So
And
a
that's
great,
like a GA hire. That
yeah,
doesn't mean that's like Hunter Johnson last year. I mean, that guy's never gonna play, and
yeah.
it's a
I mean,
culture thing.
and Dabo's an Alabama guy, so he probably respects little Paul Tyson there. So I don't know what over under 10 wins. What are you feeling right now?
To be honest, I Garrett Riley makes me excited. Okay. And now, yes, they lost some guys defensively: Murphy, Bresee, McFadden, Henry, Trenton Simpson, right? All those guys. But they still have talent. This is Clemson. They recruited really, really well. Their linebacker core is still really great. Jeremiah Trotter and Barrett Carter are elite. And then Wade Woodaz is also a great linebacker in the 4-3 defense when they go base. DBs, they always have good DBs there, and everyone's back, right? D line will be tough, but I think they got that stud, Peter Woods, from Alabama, a true freshman that's going to play early real well for him. It's going to be up to the receivers again, like it's been the past couple of years. Can they have separation? Can they create explosive plays? Expectations are absolutely higher, but you still have to prove it to me. We'll see about the O line. They're trying to move some things around. It's still not settled yet who's going to be the left tackle, which is obviously a key position. And then Cade Klubnik, I know people are high on him, was highly recruited, but yeah, he's only a sophomore and he didn't play all last year either. He only got some time in at the end. So we'll see. I think the over 10 is actually a great line. I'm not going to bet it. I would lean towards the over just because I think the upside there. I see 11-1 versus 9-3 way more often, but I think they're gonna end up pushing at 10-2 just because they get Notre Dame middle of the year. Got to play UNC, got to play Miami, FSU, at North Carolina State, at South Carolina, who beat them last year. Yeah, to me, I'm gonna push. I'm gonna hold off on this one.
I I lean under. I do. I lean under, which
Even with Garrett Riley,
even with Garrett Riley, I think Garrett Riley. Okay, it's easy to say Garrett Riley made those players right what they were. Right, he took a bunch of jamokes at TCU and made them great. Right, well those players, they were good players. They had really good talent on that team. They had a great offensive line. They had a fantastic running back. They had two great receivers, and a quarterback who just figured out how to win things. They figured out how to get things done. This offense is not as good as that TCU offense. It's not. I do
which is
think Will Shipley's,
crazy.
yeah, which is crazy. Which Will
In like
Shipley's
year 10 with Dabo Swinney, year 15 with Dabo Swinney it's a worse offense than year 1 with TCU last year.
yeah, and here's the thing. The losses on defense are gigantic. I think Murphy, Brissy, KJ Hendrick, I think the aggregate of those losses is so big that like they were so good against the run last year, right? They were so good against the run. It made teams like if you got up in Clemson, right? It was hard. It was hard to put them away, right? They were always in that game, right? And then you're forced them to throw the ball on them, which also is hard to do because they had great pass rush. It's just not going to be as good. Where's Xavier Thomas? Is he good? Oh,
He's got to stay healthy.
he's got to stay healthy, and he just doesn't. He just doesn't do that. Now the entire secondary is back. It's all back, which I like. I like the idea of that, but offensively, it's like while I love Garrett Riley and did I want Texas A&M to hire him? Yes, of course I did. All right, yeah, I'm an idiot if I didn't think that. But when I watch Cade Klubnik, I don't see a super confident 5-star quarterback. I don't. I don't. He played in the ACC last year. Like I get there were some big name teams, but he struggled in the same way DJ Uiagalelei struggled. And we'll see if like those struggles were related, to the offensive
I Yeah, I think that's
coordinator.
more what it is. I think that offense
Could
last
be.
year was not simple enough. I think Garrett Riley comes in with a plan, simple things down, dumb things down. They're also going to stretch the ball vertically and intermediate passes, play action pass, obviously, with Will Shipley and Maffa as the running backs. Um, but again, I think Garrett Riley can be a great and scheme up all these guys open, but the wide receiver talent is not there. It's not
It's not.
there.
And
And
here's another thing that I'm really worried about too. Their entire wide receiver core was not healthy this spring at all. So where are the reps that Cade Klubnik is getting with these players? Bo
yeah,
Collins was out. Adam Randall was out. Troy Stellato was out. I mean, that's a lot of people to be out if you're trying to build your chemistry in a new offense with a semi-new quarterback who's young. And it's just really tough for me. It's going to be very heavy Will Shipley, right? If he goes down, I I get that. I know that Garrett Riley is good at his job. I know he is, but it's like at some point, I don't know. I don't know. I don't see the overhitting for sure. I mean, you play ND, right? You play FSU. I think they could lose both of those
yeah,
games.
but both those games are at home too. That is nice
Both
with
those
the
games are at
schedule
home.
dynamic.
That is very nice. I think
And
at Duke is kind of a trap game, week one. You don't know what either teams are going to look like. I think Duke gets better. South Carolina, I don't know that they're going to win that game on the road. I don't know that they're going to win that game.
yeah, last year they had them at home, right? They had South Carolina in Death Valley, and then they got to go to into South Carolina this
Yeah,
year.
and you go to Miami, which okay, it's not a big deal, right? It's more so that you're not playing at Clemson. Miami,
Exactly.
if you're looking at a team that can match up well with Clemson in terms of physicality up front, it's going to be Miami on the offensive line. Like they're loaded at the offensive line position this year, and I could see them definitely putting a dent in that Clemson defense. I think Jeremiah Trotter is a fantastic player on defense. And I may or may not mention him a little bit later in the show when we're talking about ACC awards, but it's just hard. It's just hard for me to see this team going over. I'm not on it. I'm not on the under, right? I just lean under. That's what I think about this team. Anything else to
Yeah.
add?
Yeah, I don't hate the leaning under pick. I don't think you could ever right now, you cannot bet on Dabo Swinney to lose more than 3 games in the regular season, to not win 10 games. They've had
Fair.
their worst teams recently. Yes, now the ACC has been putrid, right, the past couple years, but they still won 10 games both those years. I think maybe they won 9 games in the regular season 2 years
which is
ago.
why
But
I can't get myself to bet it. You know what I'm saying? Like I
yeah,
lean under, but I can't get myself to bet it.
exactly. And that's now, yes, we talked about this a little bit earlier off air. The ACC in terms of talent gap from the bottom to the top is definitely shrinking. Part of that is because you have teams like FSU, Miami, North Carolina State, Louisville, maybe North
Maybe,
Carolina,
maybe.
but that are closing the gap on Clemson. But also Clemson is closing the gap on themselves in terms of, definitely this is not the Clemson of old, where they could roll out of bed and they'd run the table in the ACC. That not anymore.
And guess what? They can't fix their problems in one off season because they don't go to the transfer portal. Dave Aranda said it. Dave Aranda admitted that was his mistake last year. He was so confident in his guys. He was like, I'm not going to use the transfer portal. He's gone back on that. I think it's not that it's not important to recruit because that is the most important thing. But when everyone else has this other advantage over you, it's very clear that like they could have easily fixed some spots in the defensive line, I think, in the offseason for sure. Now they still have a loaded defensive line. All right. They still do, but I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, anything else to say on
Yeah.
Clemson?
Well, I think that transfer portal is a great point. In the ACC, the transfer portal is interesting because you do have a lot of schools that are really, really academically prestigious, right? Boston College, Duke, Georgia Tech, Virginia, even North Carolina, but they don't really care about school for their athletes. And so it is hard to use that transfer portal because to transfer over classes and credits to become eligible to play for them is very, very hard, especially if you're coming from schools that aren't quite as prestigious or aren't like the same level as these ACC powers. So they have to look to Ivy League schools. They have to look to other like league schools, and a lot of times you're not going to find elite talent there. But Clemson is not one of those schools. Clemson chooses themselves to restrict themselves to not use it to leverage the transfer portal. And I get it, Dabo Swinney's an old school guy, and yes, he said it before, but he can still retract on it, and nobody would bat an eye. Yes, he'd get grilled for a little bit, but he'd win more games, and that's all it comes down to.
I agree. I agree. Well, let's move on. Duke, smelly Mike Elko. Well, let's talk about this though. I mean, they return a lot. They return a lot. And they were fantastic last year for what you thought that they were going to be. Now, some of that's attributed to the ACC being terrible last year, but they were top 40 offense by most metrics, and they were top 30 defense by most metrics. I really like the way that Riley Leonard plays. I think he's awesome. Their schedule, um, it's tough in the sense where like they play a lot of quality teams, but it's actually a pretty tough schedule if you were asking me, for especially for Duke, I would say. Their over-under win totals at 6.5. They won 9 games last year. I think it was 8 games in the regular season, right? Then they won the bowl game. 6.5. What are you thinking, CD?
To be honest, I do lean over just because the fact that I believe in Mike Elko and I believe that this team it will be better than last year. Like you said, the schedule is hard. It's not an easy one. Uh, they won 8 games last year, and actually they won 8-4. They might maybe only win 7 or 6 games, but they'll still be a better team, which is crazy. Just because how not quite easy that schedule is. Getting Notre Dame in the out of conference, have to play FSU, Clemson, NC State, Louisville, UNC, Pitt, like teams that are all at the top half of the ACC that a lot of teams are picking the overs for on them. So someone's going to have to obviously lose out. Yeah, I do think they have a ton of talent coming back though. O-line, lose a little bit of people, right? They lost 3 of the top 5 snap count perspective people, but they bring in Jay Cornybrook from Stanford that's going to play tackle for them. They like some of their pieces coming back that were already on the roster. They bring in 3 more guys that are depth pieces on the O-line. And then defensively, yes, they lose Shaka Hayward at a linebacker.
Who's a huge loss, by the way.
Yes,
That is
yes,
a
but I think
huge loss.
yes, but I think Dorian Mousy and Trey Freeman will play well at linebacker for him. They still are experienced at that position. And then Darius Joyner's obviously not an easy loss on the back end of the defense there. He was their leading tackler. So they got to replace their 2 leading tacklers. But they do bring back, Brandon Johnson nickel, Chandler Rivers playing corner for him as a nice freshman season last year. They do have 5 guys that they really like. It'll be up to Santucci and to the defensive coordinators and to Mike Elko to pick the right 5 and put them in the right spots on the backside of the defense. And obviously, no Riley Leonard, I'm sure you'd love to talk about him as well. He's a monster. He
It's
led him in
awesome.
passing and rushing. Don't know if I love that second statistic because yes, he is dynamic, but you do need somebody to step up. All 3 running backs from last year return, and someone needs to step up and maybe ease the shoulders off of Riley Leonard. And so it's not just Leonard back there, but it's actually a nice 1-2 punch for that running game.
Right. I agree. Here's where I stand. I can't lean either way. I think this is a really good line. A lot of that has to do with schedule, right? And the one thing that makes me nervous, right? But also like it makes me nervous, right? Look, if you're not plugging holes on the transfer portal, right, then you're not using the transfer portal right, correct? But what I'm looking at here is they got 4 transfers on the offensive line. If what I'm looking at is correct, you can correct me if I'm wrong or I might not be right. But from what I'm looking at, they got 4 transfers on the offensive line. That tells me that they didn't love what they had there. They did not love what they had there. Kevin Johns is dog though at the offensive coordinator. I do think the transfer portal, getting those offensive linemen adds depth, which is much needed because if they were a little bit thinner on depth, I'd say that this is a yikes alert, like potential like stinker of a season, that kind of bad, right? When you like kind of like Boston College had last year. Now Duke has more talent across the board and they're better coached in general. But I also like the Tyler Santucci hire, defensive coordinator. I really do. He's an A&M guy. Oh, he's worked with Mike Elko a lot. He's a great recruiter. He's coached linebackers really well for a number of years. Now, did he lose some big time linebacker recruits these last couple of years? Maybe, but that's not all his fault. I do think secondary, Al Blades and Miles Jones. I really like Miles Jones. He came from Texas A&M with Tyler Sanducci. Mike Elko coaching for a number of years. Really long, lengthy. He started big time games. He started against Alabama in 2020 against Mac Jones and John Mechie and who am I thinking about?
Well, that was
Devonta
Smitty
Smith,
and Waddle. Waddle was healthy back
right?
then
So
too.
he has played big time snaps in big time games. He's a 6th-year player, maybe 7th at this point. I really like him too. He might not even start though. I mean, but again, though, that's another. Those are good depth pieces to add though to your secondary, and I do like this linebacker core a lot. You talked about Mousy. I like Cam Dillon quite a bit. I mean, he's got experience. I like snap count. Snap count at linebacker is a big deal to me. Now, depending on the defensive system, right? A lot of people can make linebackers look good. So he may be one of those guys that looks good, benefits from the system a little bit, but he's still a good player, and it's nice to have experience at linebacker, especially. Mike Elko is going to appreciate that. You need experience after losing Shaka Howard or Shaka Hayward. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. So the schedule is really tough. At Clemson, you get at home, sure, week 1. Like, that'd be a shock to everyone, I think, if they won that game, which helps my lean under case for Clemson. But the Northwestern at home, that's a win. Come on. Connecticut, right? You like that. But Notre Dame is their big out of conference game. That's really tough. It's really, really, really tough. I think NC State's pretty good this year. FSU, Louisville. I mean, when you draw Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, NC State, Pitt, I mean, those are some of the better teams in the ACC that you drew. You don't get Georgia Tech. You don't get Virginia Tech. Plus you add ND to the out of conference. That makes it really tough. It makes it really, really tough. So I'm not a lean in. I think this is a great line. Anything to add
Yeah.
to that?
No, I think you pretty much summed it up pretty well. I want to give a shout out to Jalen Calhoun, their stud wide receiver for him. I expect him to be right around 1,000 yards this year. Again, he had 870 last year. I think he can break that 1,000-yard mark, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him with some postseason conference accolades for sure. In terms of all ACC for the wide receiver position.
Yeah. So if that's your key impact player on offense, I'll give you. You already mentioned him, but key impact player on defense. I mean, Brandon Johnson. I would categorize him as an elite defensive player. Is what I would categorize. He's he's NFL built. He won't go early, obviously, because he's like a nickel guy. But I think that's an NFL talent right there in Brandon Johnson. But
Well, and the nickel is such a hard position to play. Uh, to have a guy that you believe in, right,
and
coming back.
Mike Elko, like that's where Mike Elko puts his best defenders. That's what he does. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, big fan of that. Big fan of that. So, ready to move on?
Yeah.
Awesome. Florida State. This is probably the most talked about team in the offseason, like legitimately. If I was to pick a team that was most talked about. Offensively, they were fantastic last year. And I'm going to be honest, I misread this team going into last year. I famously bet the under 6.5 wins last year. Famously. And I got absolutely burned. And look, I'm a believer in this team. They're loaded. They're loaded everywhere. I mean, just I have key returners, everyone, right? That they didn't lose. They hardly lost anyone. Right, sure they lost Robinson, but their strength of schedule is pretty tough though in terms of well, really just
win total wise, I think
yeah,
LSU is a
win total
tough.
wise, trying to get to 10, trying to get over 10 is tough when you have LSU as your out of conference, right? That already makes what that is. But their defense gets better, their offense is going to get better. They add Keon Coleman. I mean, what are your thoughts? Over under 10 wins. How do you feel about that?
I think that's a great line. Now, I don't want to spoil it, but Florida State is probably my favorite to win the ACC, and I know a lot of others too. But I do think that LSU game, I think they're going to go 7-1, 8-0 in the ACC, but I guess maybe 6-2 worst case scenario. But I do think the LSU game definitely scares me away from taking that line because I think you're looking at a realistic possibility where they're 10-2 more times than they are 11-1. So I do like the 10 win spot. Like you said, everybody comes back. Johnny Wilson is gonna fix his drop issues, hopefully.
Maybe.
Their O line is great. Keon Coleman, obviously dynamic playmaker for him that helps Johnny Wilson, do what he does best, right over the top, and Keon Coleman can work the middle of the field. Trey Benson's a guy that we talked about. I think he's on your fantasy team for football or for a running back draft.
I mean,
He's
PFF
elite.
loves him. The
Elite
NFL
ball carrier.
scouts.
Oh,
Yeah. So, I mean,
and now Trayshawn Ward is the backup running back who played a good bit last year. They're obviously going to miss him. He's at K-State now,
I was going to
but I
say,
don't
yep,
think.
he's out of there.
But Rodney Hill is an explosive back that was a true freshman last year. Kind of underrated guy nationally in terms of 24/7 rankings, but they like him a lot, and they kind of chose him over Trayshawn Ward in terms of where to distribute that NIL money to keep guys on the team. Yeah, I think even their tight ends too. I mean, Jaheim Bell is a stud from South Carolina. They get transferred over,
Yeah.
elite athlete playing there, and they have some other tight ends like as well. Yes, O line they lose. Dylan Gibbons, who was an All ACC guy, whatever. But they got 3 more transfers, experienced group. Even if they were average last year's Power 5 group, which was a huge, honestly, surprise because Florida State's been awful offensive line wise. But if they can become, above average or even become a strength of this team, look out in the ACC. I think they have a very high floor on the offensive line, which is kind of all you can ask for at this point in college football offensive line wise. But yeah, I think the offense is going to be awesome. And then I won't even talk about Jared Verse, who's might be the best defensive player in college football. And they return also pretty much everybody on the defensive front. 16 defensive line on scholarship. More than half of them, 8 of them have already played and will rotate in. The thing is like, if you want to talk about a national strength or on a national landscape, like in terms of high end talent, I don't quite put Florida State in that same tier with Bama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, right? They are not in that, but their 2 deeps are so good and so deep that they can withstand injuries. Maybe not Jordan Travis, but just about everywhere
Right.
else, they can they can withstand injuries and still have an elite production from a lot of their guys. So yes, I think in terms of national championship expectations. I don't think I have them this year for them, but ACC championship, absolutely. There's no reason that they shouldn't be, in that championship game this year.
Right. I agree with you. Now here's my thing. I lean towards I lean over. I do. And that's obviously you can't take the over because of LSU. Because that is on the schedule, you can't count on them to, let's say you're counting them to lose to LSU. You can't count on them to beat Clemson, right? And then not trip up the rest of the way. But I'm a huge fan of this team. I'm a huge and just to show you like what terms like the rest of their schedule looks like and how well they compare. So 10 wins, over is at plus 110, right? So you're getting plus odds there. If you alt line it to 9, it's minus 330. So that's how good this team is compared to the rest of the ACC. And you talked about their offensive line. Of their 10 offensive linemen in their 2 deep, 9 of them have at least 4 years of experience or more in the program.
Yeah.
Well, I will transfer what's anywhere like that. You love experience in the offensive line, and it's so deep. I'm not worried about them at all. There, we talked about Trey Jet Benson being dog. Trayshawn Ward transfers. Who cares? I don't. And now he'll be a phenomenal player for Kansas State, but who cares? Their defense, though, is what I want to talk about. Like, you lose Jamie Robinson. Okay, sure, goes to NFL, whatever. Shane Brown is also really good over the top. I think they really like him there. A lot of beat writers are high on him. They landed transfer Ashland Barker, who's a very, very large JUCO guy. I watched like some of his highlights, JUCO highlights. Some of the guys he was playing were not good football players from my perspective. I mean, just not. And he clearly did not belong there. He flies downhill. So I expect him to kind of crack this lineup here. In some way, right? I think he's really good. They were 4th in sack percentage in the country last year per dropback. I mean, what? That 10% of dropbacks at Florida State defensively turn into a sack. That is ridiculous. I think that's insane. I don't think that really changes a whole lot this year because they add a lot. They get better. Gilbert Edmond at edge is better. Daryl Jackson, I think is a really good player. Check out this size on the defensive front. D-tackle 6'6", 300 from Daryl Jackson. Braden Fisk is an underrated player. Western Michigan, 6'5", 305. I mean, come on. Lovett was hurt last year. I mean, Fabian Lovett. I think this defensive line is going to be crazy. That's not including Jared Verse, who you already mentioned. That's crazy. Fentrell Cypress was an absolute gem in the transfer portal from Virginia.
Oh my goodness.
He's unbelievable. He is so good. I'm just not worried about anywhere on this defense. There are no holes anywhere, right? I think Bernardo Green's pretty good at cornerback. There are just no holes anywhere that I could find. Because of that, I can't lean under. I can't. I think 11-1 is more likely than 9-3 is where I'm going with that. That's why I lean over. Can't be taking that, though, because LSU is on that schedule and at Clemson, of course. So huge fan of this team. I think Mike Norvell's done a fantastic job. He's proved the haters wrong. I was not a hater, but he proved me wrong in a lot of ways last year. He made me look kind of silly. So, but I'm all in on him. So linebackers are good too. I mean, what else do we have to say about this team? What else? What else do we have to say?
I think if they do beat LSU in week 1, there will be a ton of national hype for Florida State in terms of playoff contenders, and that 10 wins will be a lock. If they beat LSU, I don't think they're losing 2 games in the ACC after beating LSU. But yeah, I to me, I don't think it's worth the pick or worth a play with that schedule. But yeah, this is a team that's absolutely like,
it's weird because like you just know you could potentially know week 1 if this is going to go over. Like you said,
yeah. And really even if they lose the game, they could still hit the over. Like it wouldn't be surprised. I think it's interesting how different things look 12 months ago. Like 12 months, right? 12 months ago, a year ago, Florida State was like, okay, is Mike Norvell a guy? Are they gonna, even?
It was hot seat. It was legit. well, it wasn't hot seat, but it was like legit talks about
It,
like, can he be the guy? I don't know. Like,
yeah, and Jordan Travis was like a very average, even below average Power Five quarterback. This year, not is he a guy that's going to be an All Pro first round pick in the NFL? No. Is he a really, really, really good college quarterback that you can win a lot of games with? Yes,
bingo.
absolutely. And that's all you need right now. Florida State, they'll get to the high powered recruiting, later on with Norvell if they continue the success. But he has done a tremendous job building this team up, hitting on transfers, keeping guys in, recruiting their guys, changing the culture. I mean, it was a poop show at Florida State for a while. And Norvell, this year, it's awesome. I'm really excited to see what goes on there.
I love it. I love it. Let's move on. Georgia Tech. This is,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is one of the more interesting teams to analyze because they did lose some players. They lost Jeff Sims. Okay, they lost Nate McCollum. They lost Keon White. They lost Walden. They lost a lot. Like a lot of like high end, like their higher end talent from last year. A lot of that is gone. But is there reason to believe that this team could be pretty good? Maybe over under 4.5 wins. How are you feeling about that, CD?
This is a play to me. I think over 4.5 is a great
Wow.
play. I see them at 6 wins, to be honest, and with potential for more, depending on how uh, UNC could slip up, right? Maybe Ole Miss, depending on how good Ole Miss is. Louisville week 1 with Jeff Brom, who knows? But we'll get into it. Brent Key is a new coach technically, but he was interim last year. He's been around the program for a while. And the interesting thing about intern coaches, a lot of time you need a change of like you need a pretty large change. And a lot of times if you hire an interim head coach to be the full-time guy, he's not going to really clean house because it's a lot of his buddies, a lot of his guys that were on staff with him that he believes him. But he recognized that he needed to make a ton of changes. Only kept 2 coaches. The new staff, I know guys in the media circles around Georgia Tech are really impressed with. They've done a good job recruiting so far. They know their weaknesses, they know their strengths, what they need to build on. The schedule isn't too bad in the ACC, which is why I lean towards the over, because you do get Louisville at home, right? Even though I'm high on Louisville, but Louisville at home, you get Wake Forest, you play at Miami, Boston College, Virginia, Syracuse. Like that's 4 or 5 wins right there. I think, yes, the out of conference is tough. You get 2 SEC opponents, which the Georgia game every year is so brutal. This is the worst, one of the worst rivalry games, I think, in terms of like lopsided. Poor Georgia Tech has to play Georgia every year. And then a lot of times they play another Power Five team. And so, I mean, it's tough. It's tough on them for sure. But yeah, they lose Nate McCollum. Um, they lose Keon White, obviously the NFL. But their O line, everybody comes back. All 5 of them. Yes, they weren't very good last year, and they have struggled switching since Paul Johnson switched from this offensive lineman of the triple option and then to this new age offensive line with the pro style offense or spread offense. It's been bad for O-line there, but they got all 5 that started that Georgia game last year at the end of the season. All 5 are coming back. They had a whole offseason to work together. The 2 tackles are both freshmen. They're back. Sophomores, more experienced. We'll see about the wide receivers. Nate McCollum, obviously off the UNC, is tough. Malachi Carter off the NFL. But Dominic Blaylock from Georgia had a nice spring and has had success in the SEC. If healthy, he'll be nice for him. Christian Leary at Bama was kind of one of the odd men out. Highly recruited guy. Has a lot of talent there. Early feedbacks are really good on him. Chase Lane, I know you're familiar with him at A&M. If he can fix his drop issues, I who knows in year 4 or 5 with him. But at quarterback, that's the real question. Jeff Sims is gone, but we'll see. I think, yes, he's a very talented player. Yes, he'll probably have success at Nebraska, but I think both sides needed a fresh start. This competition will leak into fall camp for sure. Hayes King came in, was kind of the favorite to come in and take over from Texas Tech, but Zach Pyron, right, true freshman last year, played a little bit when Sims went down. The players like him. He's young, but the players liked him. He played a little bit last year. So having 2 quarterbacks that both have Power 5 experience, it's not a bad thing. Just because they don't have a quarterback yet doesn't mean that both are bad. But yeah, I like the over on this one. Brent Key, the more I looked into this team, Buster Faulkner, last point real quick, is the new offensive coordinator. He coached at Georgia last year. Yes, he was only the quality assistant for the QB coaches, but they had Todd Monk. Like they had a bunch of guys, right? That staff was just loaded for Georgia. He is an Atlanta native, which is nice. Just recruiting ties and like Georgia Tech ties in general. But he's had a ton of success calling plays as offense coordinator, more so at the G5 level with Arkansas State and Southern Miss.
The top
But their
20
passing,
offense with Arkansas
yeah,
State.
yeah, and top 20 passing game with
Justice
Southern Miss.
Hansen, name drop.
Yep.
Boom.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and then we'll talk about defense later, but yeah, that's what I got. I like the Georgia Tech team. You know, I think they're gaining some momentum on the recruiting trail, and it might transfer over to the regular season.
Right. Okay. I do want to ask you some questions. So I'm totally neutral in this, but I can be convinced. I didn't have a lean over or a lean under. Um, my concern was last year, their linebacking core was horrible. It was terrible. All right. Let's look at an interesting stat for linebackers right now. This depends on scheme a lot, right? But in 4.25, okay, if your average depth of tackle is 4 yards, you're not doing something right. That's what their linebacking core was last year. Their average yard depth of tackle was 4 yards in a 4.25. I don't know if I love that. For reference, NC State's last year was 2 yards. Okay, now that was an elite linebacker core, but just for reference, that's a huge difference. That's a huge gap to bridge. They bring in Braden Oliver, who I know you know a little bit about. I know a lot about Andre White. He's actually a pretty good player. I liked him a lot. He struggled a little bit last year. He battled injuries all year. I think he'll be healthy. In the years before, he was a really good downhill linebacker. He rushed the passer pretty well when he blitzed. I thought he was pretty good, solid tackling. Doesn't necessarily have that lateral speed that you might need at higher level competition, but it was a tough loss, I thought, for A&M in terms of linebacker depth in the transfer portal this offseason. I think a lot of people have different opinions on that, but what do you think of Braden Oliver? I really want to know. Come from Minnesota at linebacker.
Yeah, he was so a lot of people. He technically started for us, but he did not play a ton of snaps in terms of our base defense. Yes, is a 4-3, but most of the time we were in nickel. We were 4-2-5. So he was the odd man out. But on run games and in the Big Ten West, where you have to stop the run, you get teams like Wisconsin of the old, right? Iowa, even Nebraska sometimes,
Illinois.
Northwestern. Teams that run the ball all the damn time. He played a lot, and he's really good against the run. Yes, I did. There are two linebackers that they did lose, though, combined for 230 tackles, which is a lot. But yes, they weren't very productive tackles, and that's why they kind of didn't have a great defense last year, especially running the ball. It was actually terrible. But I think they'll be better. Defensive line, yes, you lose Keon White, but everybody else is back. So they will be better against the run, especially at defensive tackle. Everybody's back,
Yeah,
which is
I
nice.
do like Daquan Dowse. I think he's really good. Kyle
Yeah,
Kennard, gotta see a jump. Need to see it. If they're gonna be good on the defensive line, I think he needs to take a jump.
for
But
sure, for sure. But I do think the linebacker that's actually getting the most hype out of spring right now is Trenelius Tatum, who's going into year 3 with Georgia Tech. There, he actually had the best linebacker of all had the best spring
really,
of all the
okay,
linebackers.
it's good to know.
So they're gonna have 3 guys in there that they believe in, right? Which is nice for that, even though only 2 really play all the time. But yeah, to be the strength of this defense though is the secondaries.
Oh
Zamari
yeah,
Walton.
it's for real. This secondary is for real this year. By the way, it is for real.
Yeah, Zamari Walton is off to Ole Miss, right? That's a pretty big loss. He was just
It
starting
is.
corner, but they got a bunch of pieces back. Miles Sims, KJ Wallace, good cornerbacks, Power 5 experience.
Lamiles
KJ
Brooks
Wallace,
is unbelievable.
he's awesome. It finally clicked last year. He finally got
He's
healthy.
unbelievable. He's
He will
so good
be
at football.
first team, second team All ACC at safety, and even they got a bunch of depth there at safeties and versatility. Lamiles Brooks might play in the nickel too there, and the 4-2-5 defense we know about it. Very important position, very tough position.
Yeah,
Clayton
yeah.
Powell Lee as a freshman last year, like great, almost 50 tackles.
Really good for a freshman. I thought he played fantastic. That was my
Yeah,
opinion though, but
yeah. Rodney Shelley is also a freshman that played a little bit. He's coming back. Jalen King, I think he was kind of the starter at the beginning of the year, and then he's coming back too. But they might move King to safety, to deep safety, and bring Lamonsbrook down to the line of scrimmage, which I like because you just get him close to the ball, make plays, do these other things. Yeah, I don't know. Everything I'm hearing and I believe in. I think this team's gonna win more than 4.5 games. I know there are a lot of question marks. I know, in 1 year, how much is it gonna change? They were terrible last year. They've been bad for a while. They still won 5 games last year. They still won 5 games. Now, yes, the schedule was probably not that great, but I mean, they got some good running back. They lose Hassan
Yeah.
Hall. They lost
Look,
Jimmy Gibbs
they
the year
won
before
two
that.
games. They won 2 games without Jeff Sims. Like I think that's an important stat that I was looking at. I was like, okay, so they can win without Jeff Sims. Okay.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. They beat North Carolina, right, last year at the end of the season? I mean,
Yeah.
yes, North Carolina was trending down. Absolutely. They
Hard.
beat North Carolina at North Carolina. So, like, yeah, yeah. So I think offensively, they'll be better. And I think healthy, hopefully. And more continuity there. Their staff is much better this year. Chris Winkie, also co-offense coordinator, will be quarterback coach as well. Buster Faulkner loves the tight ends, and yes, they're not great, but they did bring in some transfers. They got Brett Sather from Georgia. They got, I think, Jackson Long from USF, and they also have Dylan Leonard returning as a senior. He's gonna have to carry load as well. Evan Dickens, though, a name to watch out for true freshman running back from IMG, had a real nice spring, real nice spring. Yeah, he'll be good for him.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hate you for that. I'm not gonna hate you for that. All right, we ready to move on?
Yeah,
All right, let's go Louisville. Oh, this is another team I think a lot of people are talking about. Jeff Brom, first year head coach. I think look, Malik Cunningham was a great quarterback. I think their biggest losses were Yaya Diaby and Abdullah. They were unbelievable on the edge. So they were a pretty decent team last year. They started off pretty slow. They lost a couple early games, but they really picked it up. Their defense was phenomenal. I thought it was a really good defense last year. Top 10 in points per game allowed, as you can see up there. The number one per drop back sack percentage in the country at almost 12%. Again, that's all Yaya Diaby and Yasir Abdullah. But I don't know. Does the offense get better? Maybe. Jeff Brom's in there. Whoa.
yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, look at the playmakers they got there. The offensive line they totally revamped with two train. I know you love Jamari Thrash. I'll save him for you to talk about. I Jeff Brom is an upgrade from Scott Satterfield, hands down. There's no doubt about that.
yeah,
So, um, yeah, I think
over under 8 wins. What are you looking at?
this is another play over cash 8 wins. I think worst case scenario, not worst case scenario. Obviously, there is a worst case scenario. Everybody learned from Texas A&M last year that there is a significantly worse case scenario than you think it actually can be. But I do not see many scenarios with this schedule that they lose more than 4 games, right? And yes, the out of conference is tough, not easy. I wouldn't say tough. I wouldn't say not easy. Notre Dame and then Kentucky at the end of the year. Kentucky at home, right? And I think they're regressing. We'll get into them when we get to the SEC. But yeah, Notre Dame, it's a very winnable game at home in the middle of the season, and that could very well push you to above 8 wins. Their ACC schedule is terrible, right? We talked about Georgia Tech, which who knows? Even though I like Georgia Tech, I still think Louisville should win that game. Boston College, North Carolina State, Pitt, Duke, the both Virginia schools, Miami. Yes, there are some teams that we like Duke, NC State, but they avoid everybody. That's tough. Like North Carolina, no Clemson, no Florida State. I mean, there's a reason why they're plus 1,000 to win the whole conference because that schedule is terrible, and they could very well ease their way into the conference championship.
I agree. I'm with you on that. Play it. Come on. It's over. Over 8. It really comes down to schedule, right? That's really what it comes down to. But I'm gonna leave that out for a second. How often do you see a Power 5 offensive tackle on the transfer portal that's played over 2,000 snaps? You don't. You don't see that, like hardly ever. Eric Miller, guess who Jeff Brown
Yeah,
brings over from Purdue, right? He can be a leader in that offensive line and show those guys what's going on. And guess what? And it's a quarterback friendly system, but it takes time to really learn that system with Jeff Brom. Jack Plummer knows it. He knows he played with them at Purdue. He wasn't terrible. At Cal last year, he played pretty dang good for how terrible that team was. And Jamari Thrash. Holy smokes. Um, I love talking about him every chance I can get. I was hurt a little bit for the spring game, I believe, but that's not going to change the fact. I mean, Jeff Brom, you see it every year. He's producing an All-American wide receiver every year. The question is, who's it going to be? And my guess is Jamari Thrash this year. He was fantastic for Georgia State, over 1,000 yards. I think like the next closest person on that team had like 400 yards receiving. He was that dominant in that conference. The only reason really that offense produced as much as it was producing. John Paul Flores transferred from Dartmouth on the offensive line. I think he's an ACC caliber player. I think he's got size. I think he's pretty good. I think he's good. Jimmy Callaway.
Brian Hudson too. Brian Hudson's awesome at center for them.
Yes. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the work that Jeff Brom has done in the transfer portal. I mean, they brought in 5 offensive linemen in the transfer portal, at least from what I'm looking at. It might be more. Might be 6. But so he saw that as a spot of need, right? Sometimes concerns you, but I think the guys he brought, I like the guys that he brought in. I really do.
They brought in 25 total transfers.
Yeah, and look, Michael Gonzalez, the right guard's also pretty good. Like they have like 5
he's
guys.
He's going to be in the NFL. He's a Sunday guy, Michael Gonzalez.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm very high on this offensive line, which is great because I don't know how many great offensive linemen Jeff Brom's had at Purdue. The defense is what's really concerning, though, because it is going to be a significant drop off. Yaya Diaby and Yashir Abdullah, I don't think people actually understand how good and how dominant they were. I mean, having a 12% sack percentage per dropback at a Power 5 level is stupid. It is stupid. They were so good. Now, Ashton Gillette's pretty good, but that's so much production to replace. Secondary could be pretty deep. I mean, I like it. I mean, a lot of transfers there. I like Marcus Gross-Killebrew at A&M. It was a big room, right? He left there. He's still a really talented player, 4-star out of high school, highly recruited. He's really young. He was a true freshman last year. So, Storm Duck, that's a big time transfer. And Cam Kelly, both from other teams in the ACC. Cameron Kelly coming from was UNC, then he transferred to Virginia, and then he's like, wait, nope, I'm actually coming to Louisville with Jeff Brom. And Storm Duck is actually really talented. He had a fantastic true freshman year, 2 years ago. He had a really good year. Might have even been 3 years ago at this point. He's pretty old. He's been at this for a while. I think he's pretty talented himself. I think they like their linebackers. Oh, well, they brought in Keith Brown. I mean, he's from Oregon.
Oh, from Oregon. He's huge. They lost their top 2 linebackers. They needed him.
They needed him really bad. So I thought that was a good addition. So it's going to be a big drop off, I think, at defense. But when I'm looking at the schedule right here, it feels like they can get away with an okay defense. They don't need like a really good defense like they had last year.
No, and I think the strength of the defense will be the secondary, like you talked about. They brought in 6 guys that they like, and they even brought in a guy back, Benjamin Perry, who entered the transfer portal, who's their star position guy, and they convinced him to stay. So it's really 6 if you count it. But all 5 guys that played last year are all returning, and none of those transfers might even start. So they got crazy depth there. But they like the guy that's really intriguing is Marcus Washington. Now I don't know if it's this year. He was the highly rated recruit that just put in his transfer portal after his true freshman year at Georgia. He's different than a lot of those guys in the ACC. So I think maybe not this year, but another year, he'll be awesome. But yeah, I think I like Jarvis Brownlee, obviously, at corner, outside corner. Quincy Riley was playing well last year. Their 2 safeties are awesome. MJ Griffin and Josh Minkins, and they're backed up by Cameron Kelly and Devin Neal. Who are the transfers they brought in there?
Yeah, I like Josh Minkins. I wrote down some stuff. I'm trying to remember watching him, but I wrote down stuff that I liked him. So I must like him. So there you go.
Yeah. I don't know. I really think Brom did a great job of kind of overhauling this roster, keeping it together, because it was a good roster. Scott Satterfield did an okay job keeping those guys together. And Braum can actually leverage NIL, unlike he could do at Purdue. He could leverage that to build a nice roster. I think their quarterback room is really, really intriguing. And yes, obviously, we all expect Jack Plummer to be the guy there. But look at who else they brought in. Not only did they keep Brock Domain, who's an old guy there that's been there forever, redshirt senior, but Brady Allen, right? Former high 4-star guy from Purdue that transferred over
He's a
after
top 20
redshirting his freshman
quarterback,
year.
top 20
Yeah.
quarterback in his class.
If you're an SEC fan, you know who Harrison Bailey is from Tennessee and then played to UNLV. He was a former high 4-star recruit there. And then Pierce Clarkson, who they like a lot, as a true freshman, going to be out of St. John Bosco, or yes, St. John Bosco. And he brings his teammate actually is another wide receiver, Jaheel McClain, from John Bosco as well. So I think this team, I think top to bottom is awesome. And yes, front seven, they'll have to piece it together.
There's a lot of question marks there. Yeah. So like,
but
look,
they like Adonijah Green. Adonijah Green's a good player too. They like him a lot.
We're not asking them to go undefeated here, right? You can drop one to ND, you can drop, but no FSU, no Clemson on this schedule. You drop both Virginia schools, you drop Boston College, you're out of conferences, Murray State, Indiana, and well, of course, Notre Dame. And then Kentucky might not be as talented this year again. So they could maybe steal that one and they get that one at home. So I think 8 wins is doable. I think 9 is more likely than 7. So I'm all over that over with you as well. Any other last thoughts?
10 is even more likely than 7. I think.
Wow.
10 wins is not ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous. I don't think it's more likely than 7, but I can see. Look, I share the optimism, right? We're both on the over, but maybe I'm not that optimistic. But all right, ready to move on?
Yep.
Miami. There's another really interesting one, right? Well, okay, who do you lose? Okay, most importantly, you lose your offensive coordinator.
Right. Most important in terms of key losses.
Yeah, key losses. That was a key loss. Bring in Shannon Dawson, new hire, right? After Josh Gaddis gets fired, right? He's got an air raid background, but I've heard Shannon Dawson talk, and I think he's still interested in running the ball some. So
he does love to run the ball, but because Mario Cristobal is an O-line guy. He played O-line, he coached O-line. He loves, it's a ground game. But I think he also did a really good job of adjusting. We saw Saban do that when he hired Lane Kiffin. I don't know if Shannon Dawson is going to be Lane Kiffin, obviously, for Bama, but Mario Cristobal, credit to him for going out of his comfort zone and doing whatever he can to get Tyler Van Dyke back to himself.
Right. Okay, so with that being said, 7.5 wins. Is that too much? Is that too little? Or is that just right?
You know what? I lean the over. I'm not going to play it, but I would have to lean the over. I think 8 is more likely than 6. Or I'm sorry, 8 is more likely than 7. But you do have A&M in the out of conference, who should be improved as well. You have to play, at UNC, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina State, Louisville. It's not an easy ACC schedule. And keep in mind, this team was terrible last year. I do think they get a lot better. They brought in some good transfers. The quarterback or coaching, we talked about Shannon Dawson. Lance Gildry from Marshall is awesome. Very aggressive. Lots of pre-snap movement. Very creative. Yes, that worked in the Sun Belt. Is that going to work in a Power 5 conference every week? Who knows? But I still think he's a good guy. They have a ton of talent on the D-line, in the secondary. Offensively, I think their O-line might be a strength for them, which it was not last year. So credit to Mark Cristobal for overhauling that. It will be about Tyler Van Dyke. How can he get through his progressions? Can this new, quote unquote air raid offense make it easy for his reads and his wide receivers to also make reads too? So we'll see.
I was this close to taking the over. I was this close. And the biggest reason is the offensive line. They stunk last year. They stunk. They were horrendous on the offensive line. But guess what? Francis Mauigoa, right? That's a big-time 5-star recruit who already has impressed people in spring. He might start day one. He will legitimately start.
He will start at right tackle.
Yeah, Zion Nelson is back at left tackle, who actually was probably one of their bright spots last year.
I'm sorry.
Matt
I said
Lee,
did I say left tackle? I meant right tackle. I'm so sorry.
Sion Nelson.
No, it's for Francis Malgoa.
Yeah, well, I think Michael played right tackle. I think Sion
Yes.
Nelson will play left. That's my guess. Again, I don't know. I'm not coaching there. So Matt Lee's legit NFL talent at center. Come on. He's legit NFL talent at center. Might be a late day 3 guy, but he's legit talent. Javian Cohen from Alabama, who got a lot of snaps. He got a lot of snaps at Bama.
Yeah. And not huge upside there with Javon Cohen. Nothing
No,
like Francis Malgoa or even the other guy that they brought in, Samson Okongloa. He's got to kind of reshape his body and get ready in that Power Five shape. But he's still, I mean, a ton of snaps in the SEC, a ton of Alabama coaching. I mean, you can't replace that.
yeah. And Mario Cristobal, like you said, is not going to have a bad offensive line again. He's not going to allow it. There's no way. So I'm a big fan of that offensive line. I think at wide receiver, Colby Young is a guy I think they've been looking at a lot. His JUCO transfer last year, large, 6'5" burner, high potential right there. Tyler Harrell, who Alabama thought was maybe going to be their savior last year in the wide receiver run, was not. He's from Louisville, but he's super fast, deep threat. He played well at Louisville when he was there. Xavier Restrepo is finally healthy, comes back. So I think their wide receiver room's not looking that bad there, and I appreciate the commitment from Cristobal to go with Shannon Dawson and really develop Tyler Van Dyke. Like, let's make it easy on him, right? The running back room is not super deep, but I like Henry Parrish. He's fine. I would say, like, if you're playing college fantasy football, that's a guy that's in 30-round drafts that's not being drafted a whole lot. If you want to find him there around 28, 29, 30, he's kind of a steal, in my opinion, just because of this offensive line. I think they're that good. Defensively, I think they upgraded a lot. It's still not going to be great. I think their defense was pretty bad last year. I don't think the stats in here do it enough justice because they had a really good secondary last year. Really good. I mean, Stevenson was a 2nd-round draft pick. Kinchins and Williams, who are both back. They had a really good secondary last year. And Kevin Steele, he blew it. He actually blew it. And by blowing it, there was a lot of blown coverages, like across the board. I don't know if that was just like those guys mentally like didn't have it up there, or if Kevin Steele was just making things too complicated for these guys. Now he only had 1 year to get this defense installed, but I mean, come on. I mean, I like Lance Guidry, 4-3. I mean, he's gonna blitz a lot. He's gonna find ways to get pressure on the quarterback. I mean, he coached an elite Marshall defense, so like we'll see how it translates. He'll have more talent there. I do think so there's Francis Maligoa and there's Francisco Maligoa, who is Francis Maligoa's brother, comes from Oregon. They're loving
Washington
him.
State.
Or sorry, yeah, Washington State. Yeah, we were just talking about with the Oregon transfer linebacker. That's a big loss for Washington State. That is a big get for Miami. He has been reportedly very, very good out of spring. They like him a lot.
He'll start at Mike for them. That was a big hit for them.
Yeah, huge hit, huge hit. And they took 4 corners in the transfer portal, I believe. I'm looking at, but I think Devontae Brown is the biggest one that they got. He's pretty experienced. The defensive line is it's meh. To me, it's meh. I don't know if you have a different opinion on that, but I think the biggest loss of their defense is Lou Hedley, their punter, gone.
Mm-hmm.
See ya. He was fantastic flipping fields. That's why I think like these defensive metrics, like the points per game, is not as high as it was because Lou Hedley was legitimately flipping fields big time when they couldn't get going on offense. So, I guess they like Dylan Joyce is true freshman. I think they like him. I don't know. Again, I haven't seen him punt, so they've been just saying things.
Leonard Taylor on the defensive line was a former 5-star guy that, if he unlocks that talent, but he's played well. He's played fine for them there. It's going to be a bigger rotation on the D line. They lost Daryl Jackson. That's a pretty big loss. He was a big time run stuffer for them. But they got a lot of defensive ends that like, Mesidor, Akeem Mesidor. I'm sorry. Ruben Bain, a true freshman they're bringing in that maybe not quite ready, but they do like him. And we'll see if he's ready to get some snaps there in the edge. The team will be absolutely better. No doubt about that. Like we both agree. But to win, 3 more games with a lot tougher schedule is why I'm leaning against the over there.
Yeah, I'm I'm very heavily leaning the over. I like that a lot. Their schedule is very tough though, like you said. I mean, Texas A&M, that's a tough out of conference. Clemson, Florida State, it's a tough schedule. So I wasn't ready to commit to that, right? But I still like Tyler Van Dyke. Sue me. He was not good last year at all. He looked pretty bad actually, but sue me. I think he's okay. I think he's okay. So
There was a reason there was some hype to go to Bama and to these other schools that needed a quarterback.
right,
He's a legit player, and if he can unlock what he was back in 2021 versus 2022, they will win a lot of games, I think. But
right.
again, I have a hard time, putting my money on that.
Yep, I'm with you. So you ready to move on?
Yeah.
All right, North Carolina. Um, look, I know where I'm going with this. 8.5, 8.5 wins. What are you thinking?
I lean the under. I don't know if I can take it just because of how talented that team is. It is so frustrating to go up and down that roster and just to see disappointment after disappointment, especially on the defensive line and in the defense. I mean, first of all, their secondary was terrible and it got totally reshaped last year. I mean, they failed Tony Grimes, Storm Duck, and Cameron Kelly. We've already talked about. Tony Grimes is a former 5-star guy, is over at A&M now. All these, I mean, Des Evans is a stud. Miles Murphy, Kevin Hester, obviously Travis Shaw. They lost another 5-star freshman, transferred away. I mean, it's been a shame to what Gene Chizik and Mac Brown have done to the actual concept of defense. It's embarrassing, but they do have Drake May. They do have Drake May, and they
That's
have
it.
talent.
That is
So
it.
so I mean, no Phil Longo, but I like Chip Lindsey. Troy teams, they're kind of nice. They never really had a ton of success under him. But they had a nice year with Caleb Barker, where he had 3,500 yards, 3-1 touchdown interception ratio. The thing is, they're just soft on the offense and defensive line. So that's why I don't see them winning 9 games or more than that. So I don't know. And Josh Downs is obviously a huge loss. Anton Green is pretty good too, but Downs was the guy. Third down, you needed even with all those studs. Um, they had other NFL wide receivers. Josh Downs was the guy they had, and it was third and downs.
Yeah, it was. This is a play for me. This is an under. Defensively,
Wow.
Gene Chizik. Are you serious? Like you mentioned, let's talk about some of these grid. Now I'm going to use PFF grades because I don't have like other stats to actually show you like the regression of the talent in that room. Okay, Storm Duck had a 78.7 PFF grade as a true freshman. Last year he had a 68. Okay, Tony
Yeah.
Grimes got a 63 the year before. 637. He stayed at a 63 too, and that's just too much talent to not
He kind of
improve.
gave up though on them on that staff and the team. He was like, I'm kind of done at the end of the year.
Yep, Biggers, their safety, went from a solid 72 the year before to a 61. So, like, how did all of these players in the secondary get worse? How did they get worse? Well, I'll tell you what's the common denominator. Oh yeah, it's Gene Chizik. He's the only guy that's the common denominator. Um, so
They have listen to this. They have Gene Chizik, whose title is assistant head coach for the defense. What? And they have
yep.
two other co-defensive coordinators. They have 3 guys that are all putting their hand into this defense, and none of it's fucking working.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Too many cooks and too many bad cooks. I'm sorry. There's a rumor out there that Gene Chizik is the guy once Mac Brown retires, they're gonna hire Gene Chizik.
Oh
That's fucking
my,
hilarious.
that is
There's
a joke.
there's no way. There's no way that someone that could ever happen. But yeah, I'll let you keep going. I wanted to mention that about
Look,
Gene
their
Chizik.
run defense, it was not great last year. It was not great. Bottom tier. That's not even including their pass defense. It was bottom tier, and they returned everyone on the front seven. So is that a good thing? Or is that a bad thing? Because look, linebacker, I like Cedric Gray a lot. I think he's really talented. Power
Yeah.
Eccles is fine.
Yep.
But that defensive line, like you said, there were some guys that Well, some younger guys that transferred out of there, that maybe weren't starting or whatever, but I just don't. Are these guys developing? Can they? Is Amari Gainer the transfer? Is he their savior? That's one guy. I mean, come on, what are we doing? So I don't know. I mean, I'm high on Kamen Rucker. I think he can actually be pretty decent.
Yeah, he'll play that jack linebacker position for him or
Yeah,
the edge.
yeah. So I just that it's really a defensive thing, and I do think Josh Downs was a big time loss. Plus Phil Longo, I think like those two things, I think are are a big deal. Now their offensive line last year graded at a top 60 level, and they returned four of them. So that's I like that. If you're a middle of the tier offensive line and you return almost everyone, I like your chances of getting better. But I don't think
But
it's that.
but
I don't think it's that deep.
so the O line. I talking about the O line.
Yeah,
I think so. Yes, they got some guys returning, obviously, but William Barnes, who's played guard for them in the past, they kicked out to left tackle. That's a liability right there. He is not a good left tackle in pass protection. And if you have your entire team is Drake May, right, especially on offense with all those guys gone. Obviously, I love Devontae Walker. I think he's going to be a monster fantasy wise.
Nate
Nate
McCollum.
McCollum from Georgia Tech we talked about earlier. Kobe Passauer, I think that's how you say his name. He had a really, really good spring game. Great route runner, can play inside or outside. If he's your number three, that's fine. Like they're doing fine. Their running backs is fine. Elijah Green's back. Whatever. British Brooks, dynamic runner. Caleb Hood too, if he's healthy.
Their running game was not good last year.
No, and but part of that is that Phil Longo is that your strengths when you have Josh Johnson, Tom Green, maybe, but their O line again more talented guys that are failing to perform. Zach Rice, it's a 5-star. Yes, he's still young, but he couldn't play tackle. They had to kick him in the guard because he couldn't figure out tackle. We'll see if he can crack lineup eventually. Tavon Green, another guy that's 6'7", 340. He is the most talented linebacker, offense lineman they have, and he's not healthy, he's not consistent. Diego Pounds has elite athlete at tackle. Again, he's still raw. These guys that are these freak athletes on the offensive and defensive line, something is wrong with that group, with these groups. I don't understand. I just don't get it. Corey Gaynor is their center. He's great. He's fine. He's old, but whatever. They're just average, and they shouldn't be average with the talent in that room, with the talent that they're able to acquire. That's the frustrating thing.
Yeah, you know,
You have to keep Drake May healthy. I'm sorry, I interrupted you there. You have to keep Drake May healthy.
but just such a red flag for me is like, how do you see your almost entire defense transfer out of there and still think, oh yeah, like our defense is fine? Like clearly, like these kids had a problem with the coaching staff. They were getting an opportunity to play, but they didn't feel like that their talents were being used to the best of their ability. And some of that, like, yeah, sure, coaches know best, but like, are you kidding me? What was it, like 8 transfers defensively or 7, 6 or 7? Like it was a large number of transfers on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe not most impactful players, but the entire secondary. I mean, come on. What are we doing there? So
Yeah,
I'm on the under. I think Minnesota's a game I circle as a loss. I think South Carolina's a game I circle as a loss. I think Miami at home I think that's an interesting game right there. I think at Georgia Tech is an interesting game. I think Duke is an interesting game. Like I just see so many toss-up games here. I just
they have to
see
go
the variance.
Pitt. They have to go to Pitt in week 4.
Yes.
They could be 1-3. They could be 1-3 heading into the bye week.
Yes.
That's not out of the possibility. Not, I mean, yes, they'll play Syracuse. They'll beat up on Syracuse, whatever. Beat up Virginia 2 weeks later. Probably, Georgia. I don't know. Week 10, they got to win. They're playing, what was that, FCS team? I mean, I don't think they win 8.5. I think they win 8 games, 7 games, which is crazy because this team is way more talented than that. Oh,
Yep. So anything else?
I do want to shout out their cornerbacks. I know we talked about a lot of the guys they lost, but a guy you need to know from East Tennessee State is
Elijah.
Elijah Huzzy. He is a monster. He is an NFL player. Great build, quick feet. He can play man, he can play zone, inside and outside corner. He is incredible. They like Amari Chapman, who they brought in from Virginia Tech, had 1,800 snaps in the ACC. He can play boundary maybe. Not quite locked down for him, but he's reliable. to leave and on his own. Doesn't miss a ton of tackles. Not a crazy athlete, not crazy speed, but he's very good. And it sounds like he's, can at least you can't really ruin him. You ruin Grimes, you ruin Storm Duck. I don't know if you can ruin him quite as much. Marcus Allen, as a true freshman, 6'1", long arms, nice development, good clay, but we'll see if they can actually develop that into something good. He'll probably start on the outside though, which is interesting. Lejean Cavazos, I think is his name. They're
Cavazos,
high
I
on
think.
him. 6'1", 190 with 4.4 speed, but he has to get better as a tackler and he has to get better technically. If he has to play 500 snaps for them, you are in trouble. But in 2024, they'll be good. And then DeAndre Boykins will play, the star position they call big nickel. He's a little bit undersized. Listen to how many snaps he played. 931 snaps last year. That's a lot. And he's not nowhere elite, but he's got obviously a ton of experience in there. The safety room I don't think it's very good. But
yep, I'm.
And Tavius Lane from Georgia State is fun. He's 5'9", 190, and 3-time All Sun Belt player. That's awesome. 5'9", 190 is gonna be a guy that can lay the boom across the middle.
Bowling ball.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here we go. Moving on. NC State.
Don't try not to get too excited, Matthew.
What are your thoughts? 6.5. How you feeling?
I gotta take the over here. I don't know why it's so low. I cannot wrap my head around it.
That's a great question.
Devin Leary, right? But I mean, he was hurt last year, anyways, and they still won 7 games in the offseason, right? Or was it 8
last
games?
Season?
Whatever. Yeah, they won 7 games, right?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. I forget if it was 7 or 8, but
they still hit the over. The wide receiver core is very unproven, which to me is the the
weak spot, quote unquote.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not too excited, but Brendan Armstrong again reunites with Robert and I. I'll let you talk about that because that's been your duo all offseason. Their O-line, Chandler Zavala is a good player. They lost 2 All ACC players on it, but they do have they got some nice depth there. They got 6 guys that they like that can play, and then defensively they've always been good, But we'll see. They lost 2 guys on the defense, but CJ Clark up the middle is awesome. Red Hibbler, a guy they like, JUCO transfer, and then Noah Potter too from Cincinnati. Again, they did lose a lot of people on linebacker, 2 losses. But Isaiah Moore was kind of like their heart and soul guy. Drake Thomas, the NFL, also there, had 101 tackles.
Peyton Wilson's better.
Yeah, and another year removed from his injury.
Sorry.
The question mark that.
I said sorry. Peyton Wilson's better. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But safety, Tanner Engel, he was an all ACC guy. You got to replace him. But Cyrus Fagan was good too. But Sean Brown as a redshirt sophomore.
Oh yeah.
Devin Boykin also looked good. And then, they got some. They're not too. They got Shaheem Battle on that corner. Aiden White is an all ACC guy too there.
Elite player.
Yep. Not a ton of depth behind them. I do think they are a couple injuries away from hovering around 6 to 7 wins, but I think 8 to 9 wins is not unrealistic at all.
Yeah. I mean, I just laughed there because I was looking at my notes at Robert Kennedy. They call him Poogie, who I think is another good transfer there at nickel. I'm on the over. Feed it to me. I've been pounding this table. Yes, Devin Leary is a good football player, but are you serious? Like, did no one watch Brendan Armstrong 2 years ago in the Robert and I offense? Did no one watch Garrett Schrader in Robert and I's offense last year? I get that he had a Rondé Gadsden. I don't care. It was unbelievable. Did anyone watch Taysom Hill at BYU? I mean, Robert and I. I mean, everywhere Robert and I goes, he produces good offenses with minimal talent around him. I just think he's he's just such a good offense. He's my favorite offensive coordinator in college football. And I keep banging the table for him because he's so good. Sure, they lost some linemen on the offense. They lost 2 all ACC guys in the offensive line. I get it. Whatever it is better than what Brendan Armstrong had at Virginia. I'll tell you that.
Oh, golly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Dawson Jaramillo has only played 77 snaps. He could be fine. I don't know that they fixed the offensive line, but look, he's a versatile guy, so that might be key in terms of like getting this offensive line fixed. Dylan McMahon's like solid. I think Devin Carter leaving is kind of big. I think he's a good football player. I was pretty on him, and you're right. Like this offense, this wide receiver group is not something that I'm staring at and like, oh yeah, that's really good. In fact, if there was a reason that this team goes under 6.5, I think it would be because of the wide receivers not stepping up and making plays for the quarterback, Brennan Armstrong. But um, even if Brennan Armstrong goes down, MJ Morris won football games. He was pretty good for
Yeah.
them too. Now look, that battle still is not over yet. It'll go into fall, but come on, guys. Come on, guys. I think we know who Robert and I is going to go with. It's going to be Brendan Armstrong. Their defense is still really good. Peyton Wilson is an unbelievable football player. If you've ever had a chance to watch Peyton Wilson, he's unbelievable. Now, part of the reason why this defense is so good last year was Drake Thompson, Isaiah Moore, and Peyton Wilson. The three-headed spear at linebacker, they were just ridiculous. I mean, they were torching guys. They were getting off blocks. I mean, like in a 3-3-5, if you have three elite linebackers, you're going to be sitting kind of pretty right there. But I don't know. Look, CJ Clark is coming back in those tackle. He's finally healthy. I mean, I look at the defense and I'm still excited about a lot of these players. I'm still excited. So I don't know, Josh Harris at 6'4", 350. But that was tough. But tough losing him. And Corey Durden as well. I think Corey Durden was probably their best interior guy after that. So like they lose a lot of size there in the middle, but that doesn't mean that they don't have guys there. I don't think Samuel Jackson could be pretty decent. I still CJ Clark needs to be good. If he's not good on that defensive side of the ball, like in those tackle or D tackle, wherever they play him, I could see it being a problem, and I could see them dropping a game to like Duke, um, or Virginia Tech. But I just see a lot of wins on the schedule. I mean, you get and Notre Dame, right? That's a tough game out of conference, but you don't draw Florida State, which is a big deal. UConn, VMI, right? Virginia, Marshall. I mean, Virginia Tech, if you want to include that in there. That's five teams that I think are really, really beatable. And then you throw in just a bunch of toss-up games. Even Clemson, they get at home. So I think this is a team that is just being undervalued right now. So I'm all over the over 6.5.
Yeah, I'll tell you this that we talked about. I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. With Bradley Rosner, the Rice wide receiver, their leading wide receiver, entered the transfer portal. He hasn't committed yet, but all signs are kind of pointing to North Carolina State. That would be a huge addition.
Massive. And then that would be like your value all of a sudden getting this right now where we've gotten it would be pretty immense. Now, I think the line for this, if you're taking it now, you're kind of getting rocked by the VIG a little bit. I think the odds people are on the over, but right, again, if he commits, then that would mean that this is good value and you're probably not going to get as good of odds later down the road. But I mean, he's one player, but I think he's a really good player.
Yeah, but in not, I guess it's what does G5 wide receiver do for you? That's not like an elite guy like Malachi Corley, but he's still really, really good. And what that does for you is it just moves everybody down a notch. Terrell Timmons, they love, is a second year guy, but if he has to be the number one wide receiver, it's not great. But if he's the number two guy, and then Kevon Lazan is a number three guy, and then Conception, a freshman in the slot, and then Javante Vereen, they love as an early enrollee guy, who could play later on in the season. And then they also got the Clemson transfer to Kari Collins. Rosner just elevates that whole room because he takes the pressure off everybody else. So yeah, and that would be obviously a substantial get for him.
Yeah, it'd be tough if you get him like late and your only reps with him as Brendan Armstrong are in the fall. But then that just gives me more reason that by the time the ACC schedule really starts to pick up with Duke, Clemson, Miami, Wake Forest, that gives me more reason that they're going to be better in the back half of the season. They might steal some of those games. So I'm all over that. CD's all over that. Lock it in. All right. Ready to move on?
Yeah.
All right. Pitt. A team that I feel like no one is talking about in this offseason. I
Which
don't
is
know why.
interesting.
Yeah, which is interesting because they lose Keaton Slovis, but guess what? They add Philly J, Bill Jerkovich. Keaton Slovis goes to BYU, obviously. They lose Savachi Dennis, who's a really good linebacker, Kalijah Cansey.
Really, really good linebacker. Savakidness is awesome.
Yeah, Abanikanda goes to the NFL, believes Jets. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Um, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Over under win totals at 7. How are you feeling about that?
I think that's a perfect line. I think 7 is exactly where I would set it. I don't have a lean either way. I could see 6-6. I could see 8-4. I think 7-5 is a much more realistic possibility, though. The problem is now, yes, Pat Narduzzi, they've always had a very good defensive line, but I think the trenches is where you win college football games, and that's their weak spot for sure. I think the running game will be better for sure. Will continue to get better, although they do lose. Is Israel Abanikanda, who off the NFL, good player. Jared Wayne, I think he's also gone too. He's in the NFL.
But Rodney
But
Hammond is fun. He's really good. I like him a lot.
yeah. So I obviously I think Jerkovich is an upgrade over Keaton Slovis. I don't think that's ridiculous. Now, yes, to learn the offense, but there are big time expectations for him because of his just quality of offensive line was just so bad. He was not playing quarterback last year. What he did, he has to unlearn some habits for sure, but he will find that his you know difficulty of play is a lot easier playing for a somewhat competent offensive line. Uh,
Yeah,
and with a little bit of running game too. So yeah,
yeah,
defensively they lost some guys for sure. Defense, though, they got some pretty good guys. They got 2 corners. They like Donovan McMillan to play in the slot. There is awesome from Florida. Javon McIntyre, he played a little bit last year. They do lose both their safeties, but he's got to step up for sure. Obviously, Savaka Dennis is a huge loss. Shane Simon seems like the guy that's going to step in there. We'll see how that plays. I don't think he'll be anywhere near Savaka Dennis, but he could be someone. I know that they like him. And then Solomon DeShields to play the other linebacker there with him too. So yeah, we'll see. I again, like, I think it's a good line. It's an intriguing team for sure. Because we see every couple of years, they kind of hit. So we'll see if this is one of those years. But I don't know if I see high upside for this team.
yeah. And I lean under. I lean under, and look, I'll compliment them. So some of what I'm going to say is counterproductive to my argument. Phil Jerkovich is a fantastic quarterback. Rodney Hammond is a really good running back. I don't think Abanikanda is like a huge loss, like the national media might say it is. Uh, if there's one thing I'm going to say about this offensive line, yes, they lost a lot of guys, but they didn't get a lot of guys in the transfer portal. I mean, so does that what that tells me is that they must like because it's not like they couldn't get guys. Like Pitt is a good place to go be an offensive lineman. I got a weird vibe from that saying like maybe this is a better offensive line than we think it is. But I think Kalijah Cansey is a huge loss. Savacha Dennis is gigantic. He was so good for them last year. So Shane Simon, like you said, will be his replacement. I don't know, maybe get some of that production back. I mean, the secondary, like you said, might be okay. It's just like for me, you lost your top 4 tacklers, and over 20 sacks, and you just lost a lot of snaps. You lost a lot of snaps on that defense. I do trust Randy Bates, but it feels like defensively, if you lose a lot of snaps and a lot of experience, you could see a drop off, like a regression there. And offensively, you're just bringing in a lot of new pieces. And we'll see if they mesh together. But I definitely would not take the over. That's definitely up. And if in my head, if I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not taking the over, then I'm like, okay, then I'm probably a lean under here. So I
Yeah,
mean, Notre Dame out of conference, get FSU. You don't draw Clemson, which is kind of nice, but you got to get Louisville, UNC, who I don't know might be not great, but you get them at home, like we talked about. Wake Forest at Wake Forest. That's a kind of a sneaky, scary game. If you ask me, Cincinnati, I think is better than people think they are, even though they're not fantastic. But like, I just see a lot of potential slip ups on this schedule is what I see. Not that there's like a whole lot of jaw dropping names in this list of teams that they're playing, but it's hard for me to see them winning 8 games. Is what I'm trying to get at.
No, I agree exactly.
All right. Anything else you want to point out about Pitt?
I will say yes, they did lose a lot of guys, but Narduzzi has done a good job of keeping people in the program and recruiting at positions of need to where at linebacker and at defense line, they're old. They are really fucking old. I mean, I'm looking at their roster right now. They got 8 guys, 7 guys in their 2 deeps on the defensive line that are fourth and fifth year guys. I mean, most of them are fifth-year guys. So yes, that doesn't mean they're elite guys that have taken that step to go, the NFL earlier or whatever it is, or maybe like transfer out of there and get some big time money in the transfer portal. But it's nice to be in a weight room for 5 years and then go play in the ACC. I mean, it absolutely helps instead of having to rely on these young guys like some of these programs are if they fill positions of need. So yeah, we'll see. I like Jerkovich. I hope he in the NFL. I'll be excited to see what he does. I think he'll be a better NFL quarterback than a college quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important to note that Cignetti, their offensive coordinator, has worked with Phil Jerkovich at Boston College. I think that's a big deal.
Well, that's why I went there.
That's I think it's a big deal in terms of getting him acclimated. All right, let's move on. Syracuse. I'll go ahead and say it. I'm under 6.5. It was not a question for me. The more I started looking at this, the more I'm like, what? Like, there's not a guarantee this team makes a bowl game at all. Is that what you were seeing when you were looking at that?
Yeah, to be honest, last year it kind of felt like yes, they fell apart hard at the end of the year.
Robert
lost 5 straight. But they also they battle injuries, whatever, but I still think they outperformed expectations and they won 7 games. This year, the schedule is not very hard, especially out of conference. They got to go to Purdue now, which, is this Purdue team better than last year? Probably not, but the Syracuse team, sure as heck not better. I mean, there's Sean Tucker, lost some transfers. Steve Linton on the defensive line is a baller for Texas Tech. I know Jaday's Gear at South Carolina has huge early returns. Deuce Chestnut, going to LSU. Jahad Carter got another defensive back going to Ohio State. I mean,
might be a starter there at nickel. I don't know. I mean,
the D line they got a small nose tackler who's a former fullback and a walk on. They got no depth anywhere. Rocky Long, sure, we'll see that. Whatever, they got a new defensive coordinator. Typically, 3-5 guy, but I think their O line and D line are just kind of big question marks. Matthew Bergeron was a stud. Dakota Davis, good player. Garrett Schrader, sure, he'll be healthy, hopefully, but no Sean Tucker, like I said. They got some fine receivers. Isaiah Jones is, maybe be more consistent, battle back from injury. Gatson, they like a lot, who kind of plays tight end, but also plays receiver.
And no one actually knows what position he plays, but he's a stud. He is a stud. That's an NFL guy.
First team All ACC, tight end and wide receiver hybrid, but Schrader needs more than just that. And so I don't see it with this team. There's no way they're getting 7 wins, and so I'm hitting the under for sure.
Yeah, and it's hard to plug in. Look, you get Joe Mora from Richmond. I don't know. Is he that? I have never gotten eyes on him, but he's from Richmond, right? So that's still going to be an adjustment. David Wallabaugh from Kentucky. That's another transfer that they got. His dad played for Syracuse. That's why he came here. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think Kentucky was screaming when they lost him. I think running back, I think Sean Tucker is actually not a loss. I don't think it's a loss at all. In fact, they didn't run the ball that well last year in general. I think LaQuint Allen is a very good football player. Thankfully, like his Chargers, his legal issues that had happened this offseason, he got into bar fights where he was defending himself. He had gotten charged with assaults, but that had all been dropped. So there likely no suspension for him, which is big for college fantasy football players too, because his ADP is like really, 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 really low. So that's super value there. But I just don't see it. I get that they play Colgate, Western Michigan out of conference, but at Purdue, yeah, sure, they lost a lot of talent there. And I know you're not super high on Purdue this year, but that's a tough game. I don't think Army's a guarantee win. Because I don't know that they have the people in the trenches to really ensure that that's a win, right? At UNC, at Florida State, at Virginia Tech. That's a stretch. You want to talk about a stretch schedule dynamic wise? Clemson, UNC, FSU.
Before you
That
got to play
is
Army too. You're getting beat up by Army.
yeah. So you get demolished by Army, not demolished, but you get beat up by Army, right? And then you go play Clemson at UNC at FSU, and then you come back from the bye ready to take on the rest of the schedule. So maybe they pull some stuff together. I think it's a serviceable defensive back room that they have, but man, I don't know. I think that they like Jeremiah Wilson, but again, it's just all these names I'm looking at. They're just serviceable. They're just serviceable. So, Okechukwu, I think he's pretty good on the off or defensive line at end. But again, like I'm not seeing a lot of guys that I really, really like on this team. And it's not a super it's relative to this team's talent, it's a tough schedule, is what I should say. This is not a tough schedule by Power Five standards at all, but this is I don't know. I guess they're giving them the benefit of the doubt of the like Georgia Tech. Maybe they don't think Georgia Tech's gonna be that good. Boston College, I guess. Like they drew some of the quote unquote easier teams in the ACC, but come on, I don't know. Any last thoughts on Syracuse?
Don't overthink it. Take the under. That's what I'm doing.
I agree. Let's go. Let's not overthink it and move on. Virginia, our guy, Tony Elliott, over unders 3.5 this year. I put a lot of key losses on here, more than I put for any of the other ones, mostly because I'd actually put them in the key returner spot and you'd point that out for me. But nonetheless, they did lose a lot of guys. What are your thoughts on this over under 3.5?
3.5 is a low number. I think it's the lowest in the ACC, and I do lean the over. I think it'll come down to the end against Vatek. I think both those teams will be fighting for their respective over/under win total, and that game will decide it for both of them. Again, it's a rivalry game. Who knows what's going to happen with that? They didn't play this past year because, tragic events we talked about earlier. So I'm rooting for Virginia because obviously everything that happened there. But the offense was terrible last year, right? 120th last year. It might take a year to implement that scheme with Tony Elliott, getting his guys in. But now this is the year. It's make or break. I don't see it, though. If they win 4 games, should I be that impressed? I don't think so. I mean, they won 4 games. It's a Power 5 school. Nobody should be satisfied winning 4 games if you're a Power 5 school, especially with some of the resources that you have at Virginia and the talent pool that's there, too. It's not terrible talent in that coastal over there in Virginia and North Carolina. But, yeah, they lost a lot of people. They lost a lot of people. Defensively, right? Ventrell Cypress is a stud. They lost Anthony Johns in the NFL. Stud. Their top 2 corners in the ACC, right, they had last year. They won 3 games with, and they're gone.
And they were going to get Cameron Kelly in the transfer portal until he decided, no, I'm going to go to Louisville.
Exactly, and probably be on the bench there. So what does that tell you about them? Nick Jackson to Iowa was a good player. Really, really good player. He's gone too. They lost their top 5 receivers. No, none of them were very good, but still, they're all gone. Malik Washington from Northwestern, I don't think he's that good, but we'll see.
Bowling ball. High motor. I like the effort that I see from him a lot, but his hands are just
bricks. Malachi Fields last year was hurt. He's healthy now. We'll see what J.R. Wilson does if he puts on the weight that he needed to, and it sounds like he has. Jaden Gibson, early enrollee wide receiver, has had a good one. He's probably going to play returner more special teams wise versus wide receiver.
But he could crack that for sure.
It's not a hard thing to crack.
No.
So, I mean, it'll be better. Offensively, they will probably be better.
Maybe.
But it still won't be very good.
I don't know, man.
We haven't even talked about him yet out of Monmouth. It sounds like he's going to be the guy. They kind of believe in him. He's got a big-time arm. He's pretty accurate. He's been really impressed so far. They like to push the ball down the field, and it sounds like he's got a nice deep ball. The thing is if you don't have an O-line, playmakers. It doesn't matter. They brought in some offensive linemen, Ugana Nana from Houston, and then Jimmy Christ from Penn State, and then Brian Stevens from Dayton, who's got a ton of FCS experience. We'll see. It'll be a patch job, which I wrote down in my notes. So it's nothing going to be special. But if it's serviceable, maybe I see them, cracking it over. But it's a hard team to get excited about in this year in 2023.
Yeah, I lean under for all the reasons that you just mentioned. I do kind of like their defense a little bit in some spots, but their secondary just got shredded. Not shredded like literally like, but it got taken apart. It was good last year, and now there's no one there, right? So what are you supposed to do right there? Now, I don't hate Tony Muskett. I was doing a little digging on him, and I'm like, okay, all right, this guy's okay, but I don't know. Brendan Armstrong was their leading rusher last year, so it feels like if Brendan Armstrong can't get any help, what is it feels like Tony Muskett might be in for a pretty rude awakening. Here he goes at Tennessee week 1. That's
Sheesh.
so brutal. I mean, games I could see them winning James Madison, but that's a good Sunbelt team. Um, like
Maryland too.
yeah, Maryland's is a good out of conference. Like this is a tough out of conference schedule. On top of the fact that they don't draw Syracuse, which is a bummer. Of course they get Virginia Tech, but and they get Boston College, I guess. But so yeah, there might be a chance that something big could happen, but I just don't see it, man. I just don't see it. It's gonna be a sorry, I'm definitely not taking the over, but not exactly taking the under. So give me a lean under here. So any other last thoughts?
Nope.
All right, awesome. Virginia Tech. I like Brent Pry a lot. I do. I kind of believe in him. They were horrendous offensively last year. They were actually very good on defense. And they were not given any favors, giving the team the ball
Oh
like
no.
just it was very tough for them. So what are your thoughts? 5.5. How do you feel about that?
Again, I think I lean towards the over just because I think they're gonna beat Virginia, but it's a rivalry game, so who knows? They have to go to Virginia. Not that that's a huge deal, but it's not at home with Enter Sandman. They will be better than they were last year. 3-8 last year was terrible. Their offense was horrid. They got new playmakers on offense. It's a tough schedule out of the gate, to be honest. Even your out of conference, Old Dominion, they've beaten Virginia Tech recently. That's kind of a rivalry game there. Who knows what happens there? Purdue, another Power Five school, is tough. At Rutgers, we'll see what Greg Schiano has them rolling up there, and then even at Marshall, who was a good Sun Belt team too last year. And then you get into conference play. It's kind of tough, but they did change offensive staff. It sounds like Grant Wells will be the guy, but they kind of who was the guy last year who was terrible. But at least he knows the offense. They want Kyron Drones from Baylor to take over. Both these guys are not very good throwing the football, pushing the ball downfield, but they are good athletes. They can use their legs. The wide receivers, they kind of threw a bunch of darts at a lot of people. Sounds like they'll be more explosive than they were last year. Caleb Smith is gone, but they kind of, add a bunch of guys in, and we'll see who sticks. O-line, not very good. You're gonna have
Right.
freshmen that are gonna be playing, which is never, and it's not because they deserve to play; it's because of necessity. They got 3 huge question marks. Top fives are maybe, and even after that is terrible. So you cannot have injuries on the O line. But again, they will probably be better offensively.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think 5.5 is a pretty good line. I want to lean, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stay right on par. I think Allie Jennings, like we talked about, I think he's a pretty good player. I'm a big fan of him, but again, quarterback is such a question mark. It just was not good. It was not good last year. It doesn't look like it's going to be that good this year. I'm not seeing a lot of improvement. They return a lot of guys. They return a lot of 6-year guys in the interior, which I'm a big fan of. You always like to see that, but just wow, I don't know. Like I want to root for this team. I want them to make a bowl game, but it's hard for me to actually see that they're gonna make one. And look, Antoine Powell could have some upside. Uh, Important thing to note though, Chris Marv will be calling plays. By the end of the season, he was actually calling plays on the defensive side of the ball. Brent Pry
Yeah,
gave it up to him. So I do think that is something to uh evaluate, something to take into account. I think they really like Kelly Lawson. I don't know. This is such a question mark team for me. I don't really have a whole lot to say about them, candidly. I mean, it's gonna be a wait and see for me. I can't wait. I can't wait to watch them. I'm going to be watching a lot of their games. Their out of conference seems really tough, though. Old Dominion, which they've lost to before, and Purdue, Rutgers is not. I mean, they're not a good Big Ten team, but that's a Power Five team you're playing in. And then Marshall. I mean, it's a tough out of conference, and then you go into the ACC. You don't draw Clemson, which is pretty nice, but FSU. I mean, at Louisville, NC State. I don't know. I mean, you draw all like the good ones, right? You like the ones that you would want to draw if you're an ACC team, right? You get Syracuse, you get uh, Virginia, which you get every year, Boston College. I don't know. I I have a lot of question marks about this team. I got a lot of question marks. So I think 5.5 is a great line. I think people are rushing to take the under, and I don't think that's the right thing to do with this team. I think Brent Pry's really good. I think he's got a good coaching staff in there. Um, And we'll see. Tyler Bowen's finally like the full-time offensive coordinator. So that offense, it's going to be similar to last year, but I think it's going to be more organized, if that makes sense, right? Too many cooks in the kitchen,
for
right?
sure. But a guy I want to shout out though on the defensive side is Derek Canteen, who's going to play nickel for them from Georgia Southern. He was a highly rated transfer, big time addition for him. Um, a guy that I know Brent Pry is excited about. All those guys, Chris Marvin's too. I think he could have a really good year. Even and Mansour Delaney, I think his name as a true freshman, played fine at corner. He'll be a nice, hopefully take a step up. Their DBs could be okay. Nazir Peoples coming back. Dorian Strong was hurt all last year. He'll be on the other outside corner across from Delaney. So their defense again is going to be needs to be the strength for this team, unfortunately, and they have to hold them into games. And they lost some close games last year, so they could easily win 6 games this year, 7 games. They could have won 5 games this last year,
Right.
pretty easily, and maybe even 6 if they played Virginia. But yeah, I don't feel confident enough to take the over, but I would definitely lean that way. It is a tough schedule as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. All right, well let's move on here. Our last team, Wake Forest. I love Wake Forest. I love rooting for them. Dave Clawson's awesome over there. You lose Sam Hardman, you lose A.T. Perry, you lose Kobe Turner. Those are all really, really good players to lose. What are your thoughts? Over under 6 right now. How are we feeling?
I am pounding the over. I yes, they lost some guys, but I think Warren Ruggiero, who's their offense coordinator and QB coach, deserves a ton of credit. What he has done with QBs there, Jamie Newman and Sam Hartman, even a guy before him too. Money, Mitch Griffiths. Remember that name. He'll be QB1 for him. Very, very accurate. Didn't not a ton of experience on the field, only 5'11", but he has fantastic touch and velocity when he needs it. And he's a better athlete than Sam Hartman was too. And the wide receiver room might be the best in the Big 12. Yes, you lose A.T. Perry, fine. They are still loaded there. Loaded. Wesley Grimes and Donovan Green. Taylor Moore. They were injured during the spring, and there was still that strongest position group on that offense. We'll see about the O-line. Jurgens moving back to guard from center. Nick Sharp's going to play as well. They also have that weird offense. If you remember, like the RPO, where it's like the slow mesh, they call it, which you can kind of, guard up against, bad line play, kind of hide some bad offensive linemen. But it still should be a solid group.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Mitch Griffiths. Money, Mitch. I'm a lean over. I'm not gonna go all in on them quite yet. But one guy when I was watching the spring game, not only was Mitch Griffiths really good, and I did like him. Donovan Green was really, really good in that game. I didn't really know a lot about him. I was actually not really watching for him. I was watching for Mitch Griffiths, and he just kept popping up, and he was just burning guys, and he looked really good as a player. He looked really, really, really good as a player. So, um, I'm all about that. I think he's good, and like you said, I think they also got other guys. Taylor Moore, dogs. I mean, they got good guys. They're never going to outmuscle D lines on the offensive line, right? That's never been their MO. Never. So I'm not concerned about their offensive line not necessarily being elite in the ACC, right? Their run game, you talk about like, oh, are they going to improve their run game? Probably not.
They don't
But
care though.
they
They
don't
don't
care.
care.
They literally do not care. So,
Their
um,
running backs still run for 4 yards a carry. So
yeah, they're fine.
it's
I
not
think
great.
defensively, though, oh, I think that's where their biggest luck. Kobe Turner was a dude. Kobe Turner was a
Oh yeah.
dude, and he actually single-handedly probably kept that run defense afloat. So, um, yeah, let's for reference, like on that defense, no one else graded over an 80 on PFF in terms of their run defense. Kobe Turner graded 93.2, which is second in the NCAA. So I think that's a huge loss. But I mean, Kevin Pointer, Bryce Ganius are good. Not a ton of size there. Kobe Turner's not huge, but he played big. Let's just put it that way. So I don't know. I mean, I like Jasheen Davis a lot. I really do. He's pretty productive on that
So do
edge.
NFL scouts, man. So do NFL
Yeah.
scouts.
So I don't hate their linebackers. Jalen Hudson, I think, had a pretty good spring game. Uh, I don't know. I don't know that I'm sold on this team to be like incredible, but again, bowl game is on the table. I think they should make a bowl game, which is why I lean over, right? If I was like, they probably shouldn't, I'd probably leave under, right? Or lean under. But I'm uh I'm with you. I think this is a pretty good football. I think this is a scary team to play because I don't think you want to necessarily play these guys. But I don't know. Any other thoughts for you?
The reason why I actually chose to take the over is their defense. I believe in their offense, obviously. I think, like I talked about, their OC is fantastic. I'm not worried about Money Mitch Griffiths stepping in. Obviously, Sam Hartman's a huge loss. He will be a stud for Notre Dame. And he will probably beat Wake Forest when they host a Wake Forest on week 12. But defensively, I think Kendron Wayman will be a good player they call it the Deacon position, which is awesome. Damon Deacons, he's going to be the edge. Kevin Pointer, the only question mark is defensive tackle, right? He played about 300 snaps last year, subbing in. But they like him in a larger role, but they brought in two more transfers that still need to put on weight from smaller schools and from Villanova and then from a D3 school as well. But yeah, like Jasheen Davis, I think he's gonna make himself a lot of money this year. And then linebacker, you got Mr. Captain Chase Jones. You know what you're getting with him, obviously. And then they brought in a transfer from North Carolina A&T, Jacob Roberts, a multiple-time All-American at FCS. Totally changed his body, which he needed to do, and had a great spring. Excuse me, had a great spring. And then even Dylan Hazen, who had off-season surgery, but they still like him. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. They also like a lot. So they're not worried about linebacking core. And then DBs, they like Nick Anderson, finally healthy, rotated as safety, but he's gonna kind of play that rover role on rundowns. They like cornerbacks. Khalil Carso, if he's
Kalen
healthy, high
Carson.
ceiling. Yeah,
I think he's
yep,
good.
Kalen Carson. Deshaun Jones had a nice season last year at the end, played well in the spring. And then even Jamari Glasser, a high ceiling, very young, very inexperienced guy, but they like. And then Cheelan Garnes from Navy, they hit on him. Absolutely. Big time playmaker. Malik Mustafa, another 5'10 safety, flies around, can play deep, but also towards the line of scrimmage. And then they got some nice depth pieces. So I that's the why I'm high on this team is because I think defensively they'll get enough from them and their offense will obviously still be good.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, that's wrapping up our individual teams. Let's get into award watch lists. ACC Player of the Year. Who do you like? Who do you like to win that award?
I'll give you my pick, and then I'll give you a dark horse guy that I'll be looking into for each of these. I'm gonna go with the low hanging fruit here, Jordan Travis, because I think they're probably gonna win the ACC. He will obviously be right at the top, and if they do win the ACC, it'll probably be because of him and because of how he plays with that new look offense with all those talented receivers and tight ends and running backs, and hopefully the good O line. But then my dark horse will be Brendan Armstrong, for the reasons you talked about with Robert and I, and hopefully that with some of those talented receivers coming in, and if they get some playmakers on the outside there, I think if they hit on a couple big time years, I mean, you saw the numbers he put up with Virginia's talent with Robert and I. He could do the same here with NC State.
I agree, and I think that's the chalk pick. I think my sleeper pick would be Jack Plummer, just because I think Louisville's going to win a lot of games. But yeah, I agree with your assessment there. Let's move on to ACC Offensive Player of the Year. Is that also Jordan Travis, or do you think?
I didn't want to go the same ones just because I don't I kind of I don't know it didn't feel right doing that. Even though the player of the year was on offense, I'm gonna go with Drake May, who's another guy that's probably right up the top with Jordan Travis for ACC player of the year. I mean, we know what numbers he's gonna put up. If he stays healthy, he will have a crazy season. He'll maybe be in the Heisman conversation until they start losing games. And then obviously NFL draft circles love him there. A dark horse guy, I like another quarterback in this conference, which seems to have a lot of pretty good quarterbacks. Riley Leonard from Duke. We talked about him, dynamic athlete. Seems like Duke will get better, but will they win more games? I don't know about that. But yeah, I think Riley Leonard's a guy that I'm going to be watching out for on the offense side of the ball.
Yeah, I like that a lot. My actual pick for Offensive Player of the Year is going to be Tyler Van Dyke moving to the air raid. I think he could legitimately pop off. Now the receiving core isn't crazy there, but they upgraded a little bit. Plus got some guys that were injured back. So I'm gonna go with Tyler Van Dyke there. Definitely.
I like that. I don't like that. I don't hate that at all.
So I know that's not a popular pick, but I don't know. I could see it. All right, ACC Defensive Player of the Year. I think I know where you're going with this.
I kind of alluded to it earlier. Maybe the best defensive player in the country is Jared Verse, the edge defensive end guy, Florida State, whatever you want to call him. He's dominant. He should have went pro this year probably, but I know college football is thankful to have him back. Except if you're actually playing against him, you don't want to see him anywhere near quarterback or your offensive line. He's so good. He can do everything for you. I think he's going to run away with it this year.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of him. The other guy that I might go with, I'll make him my pick. I'll go with Jeremiah Trotter.
Yeah,
If they do beat Florida State at home, right, and he's a big part of that game, I think that he could definitely be the guy that wins that award. He's gonna get tackled. He's gonna make plays. You know, it might not be the flashy sacks, right, but he's got a high ceiling there. He's a really good football player. So I'm gonna go with Jeremiah Trotter. Let's move on. ACC Newcomer of the Year. Who do you think? Who's it gonna be?
yeah, I've talked about him quite a bit in previous videos and in this one as well. Devontae Walker from North Carolina, the wide receiver that transferred in from Kent State. Him and Drake May are going to do special things. I think like we all can agree on that, like he's done with Josh Downs and Sam Howell did with the receivers before them in the North Carolina offense. I think he's going to put up crazy numbers. That's why I drafted him in fantasy over some of the other high profile guys. I think Keon Coleman's a guy you can consider here. The problem is the fun part about this is you have a newcomer, so it's transfers or freshmen. I'll give you a freshman I want to talk about. Peter Woods at Clemson. I mean, everybody pretty much knows about him. If you don't, you should. He's the next guy on the defensive line for Clemson. He'll probably play on the interior there. They got to replace Brzee and all those guys. Murphy sometimes rotated inside. KJ Henry too on the D line. He's incredible, and all signs out of spring camp were he's legit and he's going to be a big factor for them.
Yeah, give me a Jamari Thrash from Louisville. I'm still gonna ride high on him, and I'm not gonna back down. I think he's incredible. So I just hope he fits in there. Which, come on, it's Jeff Brom. He's gonna make it work. Big fan, big fan, big fan. So yeah, give me Jamari Thrash. All right, last award, ACC Coach of the Year. Who is your pick?
I think I kind of have to. Obviously, the obvious one is Mike Norvell. If I had them winning, ACC Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, all these things, I think Mike Norvell will also, add to the collection of awards coming home with Florida State this season, just because of if they win the ACC and all that. I'll
Right.
tell you my dark horse for the ACC, Dave Clawson. If he has to kind of scramble to replace Sam Hartman, and then he does, and they have a lot of games. Hopefully, they win more than 6 games. Um, and like I talked about earlier, he's the guy I'm rooting for. I think Wake Forest has the talent to do it, to win some games that they probably shouldn't this year, and that could boost if they upset a team or two.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. My official pick, is going to be Jeff Brom. Not because Mike Norvell won't win it, but like I think if Jeff Brom makes it to the championship game right against Mike Norvell, I think Brom deserves it more.
Oh,
Like if they're
year
both in that
one, yeah.
situation. So I think my pick's gonna be Jeff Brom right there. So all right, that's it. So ACC Player of the Year, you had Jordan Travis, I had Jack Plummer. ACC Offensive Player of the Year, you had Drake May, I had Taylor Van Dyke. ACC Defensive Player of the Year, you had Jared Verse, I had Jeremiah Trotter. ACC Newcomer of the Year, you had Devontae Walker, I had Jamarius Thrash. ACC Coach of the Year, you had Mike Norvell, I have Jeff Brom. So yeah, I didn't go chalk. Deal with it. All right, conference predictions. Conference winner. Who are you taking to win this conference?
Um, I'll give you my championship game. I think it will be Louisville versus Florida State. Like you talked about earlier, with Jeff Brom getting in there. Louisville's easy schedule is kind of drooling, mouth-watering. I think UNC is too soft. I don't think we either, agree in Clemson that they're just going to dominate through their ACC schedule like they have in the past. But I think Florida State has the depth to do it, and I think they're going to beat Louisville. I wouldn't say in a blowout, but I think it'll be pretty handily. I think Florida State has top to bottom the best roster in the ACC. Uh, and then I give me Florida State as your ACC championship winners.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my conference winner is going to be Florida State, like you. Dark horse, stick with my guns. Give me NC State. And now you can get them at plus 2,200. Not saying you should do that. I don't think I'm even going to do that. It's going to be a last minute call, I think, start of the season, whether I do that or not. But Florida State, that's my conference winner. It's not worth it to put money on them. They're plus 150. Like, just bet Clemson, like, just bet the money line against Clemson in that game. Or, uh, I don't know. Yeah, it seems kind
Yeah,
of dumb to do that. Or just bet them like when they're in the conference championship game, just take them in that game. I don't know. It just feels like not a smart bet. Not a smart bet. So yeah, anything else that you could think about? Might want to get off our chests this conference preview.
yeah. I'll ask you a couple questions real quick. Just do some rapid fire things in terms of just the conference question outlook as a whole instead of individual teams. Do you think the conference will be better than last year?
Uh, it's hard to say because I still think the bottom of that conference is really bad. I do, and I also think the top of that conference is not particularly great either. Like well, it is. It's good. Clemson's good. Clemson's fine. Florida State's really good, but there's not a national championship team in this conference. There's not. Like you could say that Florida State is maybe, but you look at their blue chip ratio. Like, are they going to? Is it this year for them? I mean, they're really loaded and talented. I'm all in on them in terms of like winning the ACC, but I don't know. I think slightly better. I think some of those bottom teams are getting healthy and maybe got some transfers in there. Plus, there's a lot of second year coaches in the ACC too. So, well,
Again,
particularly
we know we love.
the Virginia schools. So I'm not going to say that they're going to win more games, but I think they'll be better slightly. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit better for sure. I think teams like maybe Georgia Tech, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, maybe Miami for sure will be better. Florida State will be even a little bit better than they were last year. Louisville had success last year; those will be better. But you do have teams regressing, which I guess we'll get into later. I think the conference will be a little bit more respected as a whole, not on the national level, not at the top, tier one. When you put that up against maybe the SEC or the Big Ten or even the Pac-12, but
Right.
I think it's not the laughing stock of the Power Five like it kind of was last year and maybe the last couple of years. I guess Pac-12 was in there too. But what about this one? Who do you think? What team steps back the most? That regresses the most in terms of probably wins or just like team in general.
What team regresses the most? Uh, I hate to say it. In terms of like, okay, wins, I'm gonna go with Duke. They're not gonna win 8 games. I think they'll probably likely regress to like 6 or 7. I think that's the obvious answer. I think the team that actually gets worse is North Carolina. I think
Mhm.
they're just a worse team. Actually, correction. Syracuse is gonna regress the most. Oh, they only won like 7 games last year, right?
Yeah.
Nah, they're gonna regress the most. Syracuse is both regressing in
Yeah.
wins and they're regressing in terms of like actual talent and play, I think. So that's gonna be my pick.
Yeah, I think you nailed that there. What about takes the biggest jump?
Takes the biggest jump. Well, it's hard to say. I think it's Miami for sure. They're gonna go from 5 wins to I think 8. That's 3 wins right there. That's quite a bit of wins to jump from. So that's gonna be my team that gets better for
I agree.
sure.
I think that's exactly it. And then if you have one position that you think that's the best position of this conference, quarterbacks, wide receivers, maybe secondary or edge rushers, what do you think is the best position of strength for this conference?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I'm gonna go with secondary in this conference is really good. I like Boston Colleges. We talked about that. Clemson returns everyone back. Duke returns a lot of people back with experience. Plus, they get Miles Jones and Al Blades back. Um, Virginia, I'm a little bit worried about, but I don't know. Georgia Tech, we talked about their secondary is really, really good. I don't know. I think it's their second. Louisville got some transfers in there, including Cam Kelly, and Storm Duck. Yeah, I got to go with the secondary here. Miami's safeties are good. We don't have to talk about North Carolina. Oh, Aiden White is in here. Yeah, it's got to be the secondaries for me. I think the secondaries in this conference are really good.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I'm gonna go with the wide receiver position. I think maybe outside the Pac-12 is is probably the best position in but the best wide receiver core in Power Five. I don't think the SEC is as down as they are before. Outside of Ohio State, who's that great in the Big Ten? And then Texas and maybe a couple other teams in the Big 12 has some good tight ends or good wide receivers. But I think you're looking at Florida State's got 2 guys. Duke has a guy. Clemson does not. But Boston College even has a good player. Louisville's got some good receivers. Miami, hopefully, a guy takes a step forward. North Carolina, obviously. Like, I think there's a ton of talent at the wide receiver position here, top to bottom.
A lot of transfers. A lot of transfers.
Exactly.
Wow. Anything else?
No, I think an ACC, it's definitely, a conference that's not getting a ton of hype, nationally, just because I don't think anyone really believes in them to win the national championship. But it's a conference you got to watch for sure. We'll say that about all of them just because it's what college football is. But I think it's an interesting, obviously the 2 top guys, Clemson, Florida State, but tier 2 is a fight for everybody else in there with Louisville, North Carolina State, Duke, Pitt, Miami. Hopefully is up there. North Carolina maybe Wake Forest. Like I don't know. I think it's going to be a lot of chaos in October, November in the ACC.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. This is our conference preview breakdown. So we're gonna get some cut ups on YouTube. So if you just want to watch a specific team, although you've made it to the end of the video, so at this point, that's actually probably useless information to you. But if you want to send one to your friend, right? We're gonna have cut ups of each team. Say you're a Louisville fan, so you can send our Louisville short to your friend. Follow us on Twitter at the Redshirt Soft. That's just the Redshirt Soft. We love interacting with people on Twitter there. It's pretty fun. Email us at the Redshirt Sophomore at gmail.com. Thanks again. See you guys later.